The moment. Marcus Vane grabbed a 10-year-old boy by the collar, yanked him onto the mat and threw him like a rag doll in front of 60 silent witnesses. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Except one man in the back row, who stood up slowly, set down his coffee cup, and began walking forward. No rage, no shouting, just footsteps. And that quiet was more terrifying than any scream. What happened next, inside Titan Combat Academy, would be talked about across San Diego for years. But the story you think you know, it's only half the truth. Drop your city in the comments, let's see how far this one travels. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. He was late. Not by much, maybe 6 or 7 minutes, but Ethan Walker had spent the last 14 years of his life measuring time in seconds, not minutes, so even 6 minutes felt like a failure. He pushed through the glass door of Titan Combat Academy, with Noah tucked close to his side, one hand resting between his son's shoulder blades, the way it had since the boy was small enough to carry. The gym smelled the way all gyms smelled: rubber mats, sweat, and the faint chemical bite of disinfectant spray. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere deep in the building, a heavy bag was getting worked over in a steady, patient rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. Noah was quiet. He was always quiet in new places. Ethan had learned not to mistake that for fear. It was observation. The boy watched the world the way his father did, cataloging details, reading the room before committing to it. "Big place," Noah said finally. "It is. Bigger than Mr. Halford's dojo." Mr. Halford ran his classes out of a converted garage. Noah almost smiled. "I liked that garage." Ethan looked down at him. At 10 years old, Noah was small for his age, not fragile, but slight in that way that made strangers either want to protect him or test him. He had his mother's eyes dark and thoughtful, and his father's jaw stubborn in ways that didn't always announce themselves until the moment they mattered. He was wearing his old sneakers, the ones with the left sole starting to separate, and a gray hoodie 3 sizes too big that he refused to let Ethan throw away because, as Noah put it, big hoodies were better for thinking. Ethan hadn't pushed him about the shoes. He'd learned to choose his battles. A woman at the front desk looked up from her phone and smiled the practiced smile of someone who smiled at strangers for a living. "First visit." "Yes, ma'am. My son is interested in the youth program." Ethan placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "We saw the ad online. Wonderful. Mr. Vane teaches the youth class himself on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He's very passionate about working with kids." She said it the way people read from a brochure. "We have an introductory session tonight if you want to observe. No commitment." "That works." She handed him a clipboard with a liability waiver on top. Ethan scanned it with the same efficiency he'd once used scanning ridgelines. He signed at the bottom without ceremony, handed it back, and turned to find Noah already drifted 6 feet toward the mat area, watching the students warming up. The kid was drawn to movement, always had been. "Noah." His son looked back. "Stay close for now." "I know, Dad." They moved to a row of chairs along the far wall, where several other parents were already seated, mostly mothers, a few fathers, all of them doing the same quiet evaluation of each other that parents always did in new spaces. "What kind of fan are you? Are you the serious kind or the fun kind? Are your kids the rough kind?" Ethan sat down, folded his hands in his lap, and he watched. He was very good at watching. Marcus Vane entered the main mat area, the way weather enters a room. There was a shift in the air before you saw him. Students, straightening chatter, dropping bodies, orienting toward the door from the back hallway, even before it swung open. He was tall, somewhere around 6'1", built with the kind of deliberate musculature that came from years of both functional training and vanity-driven maintenance. He moved like someone who'd been told his whole life that he moved well. There was no wasted motion, but there was also something performative about it. A man who always knew where the cameras were, even when there weren't any. He was 28 years old. He'd been competing since he was 12. His record in amateur kickboxing was 19 wins, 4 losses, and he would have mentioned the losses by now if the numbers still bothered him, which they did, which was why he mentioned them first to control the narrative. He wore a black G top and dark compression pants. his black belt wrapped with the kind of careful precision that some instructors use to send a message. His hair was cut close on the sides, longer on top, the kind of style that photographed well. He had a strong jaw, excellent posture, and the easy confidence of someone who'd never once walked into a room and felt like the smallest person in it. 3 seconds after he entered, he was already scanning the parents' section. His eyes landed on Noah first. Not because Noah was doing anything, the boy was simply sitting beside his father, watching everything with those quiet, careful eyes. But Marcus had a category for that kind of kid. The unimpressed kind. The ones who didn't light up when he entered, who didn't angle toward him the way a plant angles toward sun. He didn't like that category. His eyes moved to Ethan, registered ordinary, and moved on. "All right." Marcus clapped his hands twice, sharp and commanding. "Circle up. Let's go. We've got some new faces in the parents section, which means we're going to show them what real discipline looks like. Nobody's here to play. Yes. Yes, sir." 12 youth students scrambled into a loose circle on the mat. Marcus's gaze swept the room again and landed back on Noah with a slight tilt of his head. "New kid, you're observing tonight." Noah looked up. "Yes, sir." "You want to train here?" "I'm thinking about it." Something flickered across Marcus's expression. Not anger exactly, more like the mild irritation of a man who expected enthusiasm and received consideration instead. Thinking about it. He repeated it like a verdict. "Okay, watch carefully then. I'll give you something worth thinking about." He turned back to his students. Ethan said nothing. He kept his posture relaxed, but his eyes never left Marcus Vane's face. The class ran 45 minutes. Ethan watched all of it. He watched how Marcus moved through the space, always at the center, always facing the largest cluster of students, always aware of his audience. He was technically skilled. Ethan could see that clearly. His combinations were clean, his footwork precise, his explanations confident and detailed. He knew the craft. But craft and character were different things. Ethan had spent enough time around instructors and buds in combat training pipelines in the 6 years he'd spent working alongside force recon teams before his discharge to know the difference between a man who taught because he loved building people up and a man who taught because he loved standing above them. Marcus corrected students loudly. That was the first thing he noticed. Not quietly, so the lesson is private and the dignity is preserved. Loudly, so everyone heard. So the mistake became a story, and the student became the example. "Jason, Jason, everyone stop. Watch Jason's feet." He pointed without looking at the boy directly. "That's what it looks like when you don't listen. You see that stance. That's how you get dropped." Jason was maybe 11 years old. He turned red and stared at the mat. "Don't look down, Jason. That's not where your opponent is." The other students laughed. Not because it was funny, their laughter had a nervous edge to it, and I'm glad it's not me quality that told Ethan everything about the social climate Marcus had built. The second thing Ethan noticed was how Marcus responded to genuine talent. One of the older, a girl, maybe 13, quick and technically sharp, executed a combination that was genuinely impressive. Clean entry, good shoulder rotation, controlled exit. Marcus watched, said nothing. Moved on. He didn't correct her because she hadn't made a mistake. He didn't praise her because praise cost him something he wasn't willing to spend. Ethan filed that away too. Noah watched all of it from the chair beside him. His son's face was difficult to read. It always was, but his posture told the story. He'd come in sitting forward, elbows on knees, curious. Halfway through the class, he'd sat back. Arms slightly closer to his body. Shoulders half an inch higher than usual. Defensive posture. Comfort withdrawal. Ethan noticed. He didn't say anything yet. He was still watching, still learning. After the class, Marcus dismissed the students and moved toward the parents with the easy charisma of a man giving a performance. Questions, comments. "My program is built on one principle." He let that hang in the air for a moment, the way he'd done it before many times. "Comfort is the enemy of growth. I push these kids because the world will push them, and I'd rather they learn what pressure feels like here, Where it's safe, then discover it for the first time in a situation where the consequences are real. One of the fathers nodded. A couple of mothers leaned forward. Ethan kept his face neutral and asked quietly, "What's your policy on how corrections are delivered?" Marcus looked at him, the kind of look that measured. "I'm direct. Is that a problem?" "No, I'm asking about the method, not the frequency." A pause. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. A small recalibration, the way a man recalibrates when he suddenly isn't sure which direction the challenge is coming from. "I deliver feedback the way competition delivers it. Publicly. Without cushioning. Because cushioning doesn't prepare kids for the real world." Ethan nodded once, as if filing that too. "My son is Noah. We'll think of it and follow up." He stood, placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, and they walked out. Marcus watched them go. His jaw was slightly tight. He couldn't have said why the conversation bothered him. The man had barely said anything. But something about the way he'd asked the question, not combatively, not nervously, but carefully, had left Marcus with the unsettling feeling that he'd been evaluated and wasn't sure what score he'd received. He didn't like that feeling. He had never liked that feeling. In the parking lot, Ethan unlocked the truck and waited until Noah had climbed in before he got behind the wheel. He sat for a moment without starting the engine. "So," he said. "So," Noah said. "Tell me what you saw." Noah was quiet for a few seconds. He pulled the drawstring of his hoodie through his fingers. "He's good at the fighting part." "He is. But he made Jason feel stupid on purpose." "Did he?" "Yeah. He said watch Jason's feet, but he wasn't actually teaching Jason anything. He was just using Jason to make himself look like the smart one." Noah paused. "That's different." Ethan looked at his son. "Yeah, that's different." "Is that what all martial arts instructors are like?" "No. Some of the best teachers I ever had were the quietest ones in the room." "Were they good at fighting?" "They were the most dangerous people I've ever been around." Ethan said it without drama, just fact. "And they would have let you walk right past them on the street without ever knowing it." Noah considered that for a long moment. "So why are we still thinking about going back?" Ethan finally started the engine. "Because you being uncomfortable around someone like Marcus Vane is exactly the reason you need to learn how to handle yourself. The world is full of Marcuses. Most of them aren't teaching martial arts. They're running offices, coaching sports teams, managing workplaces. And if you learn how to stand up in a room with that kind of energy without losing yourself..." He pulled out of the parking lot. "You'll be fine everywhere else." Noah was quiet for a long moment. "What if I don't want to give him the tuition money?" Ethan almost smiled. "We'll talk about that. I'm just saying, the girl, the fast one, the 13-year-old, she did that combination, and he didn't even look at her. She's really good, and he completely ignored her. That's rude." "It is." "I don't want to be the fast girl he ignores." "You won't be." "How do you know?" Ethan glanced at his son. "Because I won't let you become invisible to yourself just because someone else refuses to see you clearly." Noah didn't answer that. But after a moment, he pulled the drawstring of his hoodie again, and something in his shoulders eased a little. Just a little. They went back. Ethan told himself it was because he wanted to give Marcus a fair evaluation. A second look. One observation wasn't a conclusion. That was mostly true. The other part, the part he didn't say out loud, was that something in his gut was telling him this was important. Not just for Noah's training. For something else he couldn't fully articulate yet. His gut had never once been wrong. Over the next 3 weeks, they attended Tuesday and Thursday sessions. Noah participated in the junior class. Ethan watched from the side. He had learned over a lifetime of operating in unfamiliar environments, how to become invisible when he needed to, how to sit in a way that communicated background detail, how to hold his posture just slightly down from its full natural height, how to keep his face relaxed, even when what he was seeing made him very quiet inside. He became very quiet inside a lot over those 3 weeks. Week 1, Marcus called Noah the thinker in a tone that made thinking sound like a character flaw. The thinker wants to analyze everything before he moves. The problem is, the opponent doesn't wait for your analysis. He smiled at the other students. Several laughed. Noah held his position on the mat and said nothing. Ethan said nothing from the chairs. Week 2. During a grappling drill, Marcus paired Noah with a student 2 years older and 40 pounds heavier, not for legitimate challenge-based training. Ethan had seen that knew what it looked like, but because Marcus wanted the demonstration to go a specific way, he wanted Noah on the ground. Noah ended up on the ground, 3 times in 4 minutes. Marcus watched with his arms crossed and said, "See, this is what happens when someone trains their brain instead of their instincts. The brain hesitates. The body pays for it." Ethan set down his coffee cup, very carefully. Noah climbed up the 3rd time with his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the middle distance, and Ethan recognized that expression with a sharpness that went somewhere past fatherhood. It was the expression of a person deciding whether to absorb what they were being told or reject it, whether to believe it or refuse it. He'd worn that expression himself once in a cold compound in the early hours of a morning. He still didn't talk about standing over 3 teammates who weren't going to stand up again, deciding whether the story being written about that moment was going to be "this broke us" or "this made us hard enough to keep going." He wasn't going to let his 10-year-old son stand on a mat in suburban San Diego and fight that same battle alone. Not yet. Not like this. Week 3 was where it changed. Chatag. Tuesday evening the gym was more crowded than usual. A parent preview night. Marcus had sent an email the week before, encouraging families to come watch and see real development in action. Several extra chairs had been set up along the walls. The ambient noise was higher. Children performed slightly better when observed and slightly worse depending on the child. Noah performed the same. He always performed the same regardless of audience. Marcus had picked up on this, and it irritated him in ways Ethan was sure Marcus couldn't fully explain to himself. 15 minutes into the session, Marcus stopped the class. "We're going to demonstrate a defensive technique. This is something we've been building toward for the past few sessions." He looked across the mat with the particular kind of deliberateness that told Ethan he'd already decided who he was pointing at before he looked. "Noah, come up here." Noah stepped forward. He didn't hesitate. The boy had enough of his father's constitution to keep his face still. But Ethan saw the slight change in his breathing, the almost invisible tension across his shoulders. He knows, Ethan thought. He already knows this isn't going to be good. "Stand here." Marcus positioned Noah on the mat in front of him. "I'm going to demonstrate a counter-grab technique. Very simple. Very fundamental. The defender braces, rotates at the hip, and redirects the attacker's momentum." He looked at the parents. "The principle is that size doesn't determine outcome if the mechanics are correct." A mother in the front row nodded. Someone took out their phone to film. "Ready?" Marcus asked Noah. "Yes, sir." Marcus grabbed him by the collar. What happened next took 3 seconds, but Ethan parsed it into components, the way he parsed everything that moved fast, because speed was where details hid, and details were where truth lived. Component 1. The grab was too hard. Not instructional grip, aggressive grip. The kind that communicated "I own this moment" to an audience that couldn't feel what the 10-year-old on the other end of it was feeling. Component 2. The throw was not calibrated to Noah's body weight. Ethan had watched Marcus demonstrate this same technique with a 16-year-old student 2 weeks earlier and adjusted the force proportionally as a competent instructor should. He did not adjust for Noah. The throw went full. Component 3. Noah's landing was wrong. Not because the boy failed to brace he tried, but because he hadn't been set up for the fall. He hadn't been shown how to take it. He was just thrown and left to figure out the landing on his own. He hit the mat hard. Left side, hip and ribs. The sound was flat and definitive. The gym went completely silent. Noah lay still for 2 full seconds. The kind of still that wasn't choice, that was body responding to impact before the brain could argue with it. Then he tried to breathe, and the breath came shallow and off, and Ethan recognized the sound of a person whose diaphragm had been temporarily shocked and was struggling to reboot. Marcus looked down at him. "Get up," he said. Noah tried. Fighters don't cry. And here was the thing. Here was the precise detail that separated this moment from all the moments before it. The thing that sealed something in Ethan Walker's chest with a sound like a vault closing. Noah wasn't crying. His eyes were bright with the particular brightness that comes from pain being processed at maximum speed by a body that refuses to show it. But there were no tears on his face. He was fighting not to cry, which was harder than crying, and Marcus had used the accusation anyway, not because he saw tears that weren't there, but because the accusation itself was the weapon. Because telling a boy he was crying when he wasn't was a specific kind of cruelty that said, I don't care what you're actually doing. I'll decide who you are. Ethan was already standing. He didn't shout. He didn't knock anything over. He didn't do any of the things that the version of this moment in a lesser story would require. He just stood up from his chair in the back row of the parents' section and began walking toward the mat. Slow, measured. The particular kind of quiet that wasn't empty. The kind that had weight to it, the kind that filled space, the way sound fills space in certain rooms where the acoustics are wrong. Every head turned. Ethan didn't notice them. Or rather, he noticed them the way he noticed everything cataloged, filed, and set aside because they weren't relevant to what he was walking toward. He reached Noah. He crouched down not quickly, not with panic, but completely with the full attention of a person whose attention was formidable, and he put his hand on his son's back. Breathe, he said quietly. Short breath first. Let the second one be longer. Noah breathed. There you go. Good. I'm okay, Noah managed. His voice was tight. I know you are. You're going to keep being okay. Ethan helped him to standing. His hand stayed on his son's shoulder. Then he looked at Marcus. It was the kind of look that didn't contain anger. Anger was a feeling that needed something external from you. It required you to heat up, to expand, to reach outside of yourself for fuel. What Ethan's face contained was nothing like anger. It was the simple, devastating absence of any remaining patience. Marcus met his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. And for the first time since Ethan Walker had walked into Titan Combat Academy, Marcus Vane felt something shift under his feet that he didn't have a name for and didn't like at all. We're leaving, Ethan said. Quiet. Not to Marcus, to Noah. Get your bag. Yeah, okay, Noah said. And Marcus, who should have let them go, who would have been fine if he'd let them go. Marcus opened his mouth. Leaving in the middle of a session, he said just loud enough for the parents in the chairs to hear. That's exactly the mentality I'm talking about. The second things get uncomfortable, we run. Ethan paused. His back was to Marcus. He was still facing the direction of the door. He paused for exactly 3 seconds, long enough that anyone watching held their breath, wondering whether the pause meant something or nothing, and then he turned around. I'm sorry. His voice was not apologetic. It was the voice of a man who wanted to make absolutely certain he'd heard correctly. You heard me. Marcus crossed his arms. He was performing again. He'd found his footing. He could feel the audience behind him. We push through difficulty here. We don't leave because our feelings got bruised. His ribs got bruised, Ethan said. That's different. Injuries happen in training. That throw was not calibrated to a 10-year-old's body weight. Ethan's voice remained exactly level. I've watched you do that technique 6 times in the past 3 weeks. You adjusted your force every other time. You didn't tonight. A pause. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't need a parent to critique my technique. I'm not critiquing your technique. Ethan took a single step toward him. I'm describing what I observed. And what are you exactly? Marcus asked. His voice had an edge now, the kind of edge that was meant to diminish. Some guy who lifted weights in his garage and thinks that qualifies him to assess a professional. Several parents shifted in their chairs. Ethan looked at Marcus Vane for a long moment. The kind of look that doesn't have heat in it, because the evaluation is already complete, because the information has been gathered, processed, and acted on, and what remains is simply the conclusion. I think what you need, Ethan said, is for this conversation to be over. He turned back to Noah. Your bag, let's go. Marcus took a step forward. And that was the mistake. That was the one Marcus Vane should not have made, the step that said, I am not done deciding what happens in this moment, and behind him in the chairs. Ethan would later learn that 3 separate parents had each drawn in a sharp breath at the same time, because each of them had seen something in that moment that they couldn't entirely explain, but that their bodies understood before their minds did. "I think," Marcus said loud enough now for the whole room, "that you should walk out that door and not come back, because clearly you don't belong here, and neither does your kid." Ethan stopped walking. His hand was still on Noah's shoulder. He could feel the tension in the boy's body, not fear, not the flinching kind of tension, but the held still tension of someone waiting to see what the next thing is going to be. He thought about walking out. He considered it fully the way he considered everything, not as avoidance, but as genuine tactical assessment. Walk out. Protect the moment. Let Noah see that the dignified exit was always an option. But then he looked around the room. He saw 12 children in that youth class, and he read their faces the way he'd always read faces quickly, accurately, without room for wishful interpretation. He saw Jason, who'd been made an example of in week 1, staring at the mat in the particular way of someone who'd stopped expecting anything good to come from this room. He saw the fast girl, the talented 13-year-old, whose combination Marcus had never once acknowledged, watching with wide, careful eyes. He saw 2 or 3 children who had the specific watchfulness of kids who'd learned to make themselves small in spaces where being visible was dangerous. "I thought Noah isn't the first, and he thought if I walk out he won't be the last." He turned back around. "The sparring match," he said. "You want to settle the question of who belongs here? We can do that." The silence in the gym became something different. It became the kind of silence that happens when an unexpected door opens in a room full of people who didn't know there was a door there. Marcus stared at him. For the first time since Ethan had walked through the door of Titan Combat Academy, Marcus Vane had absolutely no idea what the next move was. He'd been living for 10 years in a world where he was the most dangerous person in every room he entered. He had no framework for a man who walked forward instead of back. "Sure," Marcus said finally. His voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. "If you want to embarrass yourself in front of your kid, that's on you." Ethan nodded once. He looked down at Noah. Noah was looking up at him with those dark, careful eyes, and his expression was impossible to fully interpret. Not quite fear, not quite pride, not quite certainty, but some composite of all 3 that didn't have a single word for it. "You want to move to the chairs over there and watch?" Ethan asked him, quietly, just between them. Noah was quiet for a second. Then, "You don't have to do this for me." "I know," Ethan said. "That's not why I'm doing it." Noah held his gaze. "Why then?" Ethan looked at the gym around them, at the parents in the chairs, at the 12 children on the mat, at the space that had been designed to build courage and had been turned into a machine for manufacturing fear. He looked back at his son. "Sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that inconveniences you," Ethan said. "And sometimes you do it not because it fixes everything, but because it's true. And the truth is worth the inconvenience." Noah blinked, nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay." Ethan straightened. He looked at Marcus one more time. "Let's keep it simple," he said. "Full contact. No stopping until one of us can't continue." Marcus nearly smiled. It almost reached his eyes. "You got it." He had no idea what he'd just agreed to. And across the room, in a row of chairs near the door, a woman named Diane, mother of the talented 13-year-old who never got acknowledged, leaned over to the father sitting next to her and said very quietly, "Who is that man?" The father shook his head. "I don't know." She watched Ethan Walker remove his jacket and hand it to his son, and she noticed the way he moved when he wasn't performing for anyone, the economy of it, the absolute absence of wasted motion, the particular quality of a body that had been trained not for competition, but for survival. And she said even more quietly, "But I don't think Marcus knows either." She was right. He didn't. And what happened next in Titan Combat Academy on that Tuesday evening in San Diego, California, would take 30 seconds of actual time and would be replicated in the memory of every person in that room for the rest of their lives. Nobody moved. That was the thing. Ethan noticed first. Not the murmuring that broke out across the parents' section. Not the way Marcus was already rolling his shoulders and bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet, performing readiness for an audience that hadn't asked for a show. What Ethan noticed was that nobody moved toward the exit. 60-something people in that gym, and not one of them walked out. People always stayed when they sensed something true was about to happen. He handed his jacket to Noah without looking away from the mat. Noah took it with both hands and held it against his chest like something fragile. "Stay by the wall," Ethan said. "Dad." Wall Noah. His son moved to the wall. Ethan watched him go, tracked him until the boy was seated on the bench near the far corner, jacket folded in his lap. Eyes already locked on his father, with that particular expression. The one that was too controlled for a 10-year-old. The one that Ethan sometimes looked at and felt something heavy and complicated settle in the center of his chest, because no child should have to work that hard at being still. He turned back to the mat. Marcus had already stepped to the center of it. He was moving the way fighters move when they're trying to look loose, exaggerated rotation of the shoulders, theatrical neck rolls, a small bounce in each step that was 30% warm-up and 70% theater. He had his black belt students, 2 of them older teenagers, standing at the edge of the mat, now having appeared from somewhere in the back of the gym, positioning themselves where Marcus could see them easily and where they could see him. Witnesses he'd selected before the match even started. Ethan noticed that. Filed it. "Standard rules?" Marcus asked. His voice was carrying. He was speaking to Ethan but performing for the room. "Full contact, standing only, stop if someone taps or goes down and doesn't get up." "That's fine. You ever actually sparred before? Or is this your first time?" He said it lightly with a small smile that invited the room to laugh with him. A few people did nervous, reflexive laughter, the social autopilot kind. Ethan didn't answer. He stepped onto the mat, and here was the moment, the first one, where something changed in the room. Not dramatically. Not with a sound or a sudden movement. It happened the way pressure changes in a room when a door opens from a cold exterior gradually, and then all at once, and then you couldn't remember what the air had felt like before. Because when Ethan Walker stepped onto the mat and simply stood there, the way he stood there was different. He wasn't bouncing. He wasn't performing. He wasn't doing anything that announced itself. He was just standing the way a person stands when they have no concern whatsoever about what the room thinks of their posture. Feet at natural width, weight distributed without drama, hands relaxed at his sides. It was the stillness that did it. Not aggressive stillness. Not the coiled, theatrical stillness of a fighter signaling danger. Just genuine, absolute stillness. The stillness of a man who had stood in worse places than this gym and waited for worse things than Marcus Vane. Diane, sitting in the third row of chairs with her daughter Priya beside her, felt it before she understood it. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, and without quite deciding to, she stopped talking to the woman beside her mid-sentence. Marcus felt it too. His bouncing slowed by a fraction. Just a fraction. "Whenever you're ready," Ethan said. Marcus came forward fast. "How was good?" Ethan had already known that from 3 weeks of observation, but knowing it from the sideline and being in front of it were 2 separate data sets, and the second one arrived in the first half-second with a clarity that he absorbed without surprise. Marcus's opening combination was precise and quick, 2 jabs to establish distance and force a response, a hook that was looking for the flinch, a follow-up low kick designed to land while attention was still upstairs. None of it landed. Not in a showy way. Not with Ethan rolling away dramatically or slipping to the side with the kind of technique that announced itself. The jabs hit air because Ethan's head was no longer where it had been when Marcus committed to the strikes. The hook found a forearm that was already rising. The low kick grazed a shin that had already shifted its weight. Minimal. Efficient. Nothing wasted. Marcus reset. His jaw was tighter. He pushed forward again. Combination, then grapple attempt, hands reaching for a clinch. And this time, Ethan moved inside. It changed the angle, redirected Marcus's momentum with a single hand on the back of his elbow that was so clean it looked simple, and Marcus stumbled 1 step past him and had to catch himself. The room made a sound. Not a gasp, something softer. the involuntary small exhale of surprise. Diane's daughter. Priya grabbed her mother's arm. Marcus turned around. His face had changed. The performance was still there, the jaw, the posture, the controlled expression. But behind his eyes, something was working hard, that wasn't supposed to have to work this hard yet. "Okay," he said, just to himself, just to recalibrate. He came again. This exchange lasted longer. 40 seconds maybe. Marcus fighting the way he fought when winning started to feel optional, with more aggression, more committed strikes, trading the economy of a planned combination for the pressure of volume. He was fast. He was technically trained. And none of it was touching the man in front of him. Ethan was not running. He was not backpedaling, not covering up, not doing any of the defensive behaviors that would have told the room he was in trouble. He was moving through the engagement, the way water moves through interference, not around it, but through it, redirecting pressure, rather than absorbing it, always maintaining the angles that kept Marcus in front of him, rather than on top of him. And he hadn't thrown a single strike. That was the thing the parents began to notice around the 1-minute mark. In the chairs, a father named Gerald, retired Army. 2 tours in Iraq. Now a contractor in Coronado, had been watching with his arms crossed and his head tilted, and at some point he quietly uncrossed his arms and sat forward, because what he was watching wasn't sparring in any way he recognized from gym competition. What he was watching was something he hadn't seen outside of a training environment he'd only been adjacent to, never part of. He leaned to the woman beside him and said low, "That man has been trained." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" Gerald watched Ethan redirect another one of Marcus's attacks. Not blocked. Redirected, the distinction being that blocking absorbed force while redirecting borrowed it, and he said, "I mean that man has been trained by people who were training him to keep breathing in situations where breathing was not guaranteed." Marcus pulled back. He was breathing harder than he should have been for 90 seconds of work. He reset his stance, and then he said something that told Ethan everything he needed to know about what kind of man Marcus Vane was when the performance stopped working. "Stop moving," Marcus said. Not as a taunt. Not with the light delivery of controlled competition. He said it with an edge that was naked and unplanned, the voice of someone whose script had run out. "Fight me straight." Ethan looked at him. "You want me to fight you the way you want me to fight you," Ethan said. His breathing was even, completely even. "That's not how fights work." Marcus's eyes darkened. He came forward, and this time he was not being precise, and he was not being technical, and he was not thinking about what the parents in the chairs were seeing, because somewhere in the last 90 seconds, something had shifted in him, and the performance had collapsed from the inside, and what was left was raw forward motion and the simple furious need to make contact with the man in front of him. He launched. Hard and committed. The kind of attack that worked when it landed and left you fully exposed when it didn't. Ethan stepped inside. One movement. Not large. Not theatrical. The punch came from a distance of 18 inches, and it landed with the kind of precision that does not come from anger or adrenaline, but from 10,000 repetitions in conditions designed to eliminate everything except the accurate delivery of force to the correct target. Marcus's head snapped back. His legs went. He went down hard, and he stayed down. The gym was so quiet that the sound of the fluorescent lights overhead became audible, that low electrical hum that was always there, but nobody ever heard because the room was never this still. Then Priya, who was 13 years old and had been coming to this gym for 14 months and had executed combinations that Marcus had never once acknowledged, said in a voice that carried completely across the silent room, "Oh my God." And that was the sound that broke the stillness. Ethan was already moving toward Marcus before Marcus had fully registered that the floor was under him. He crouched down, pressed 2 fingers to the side of Marcus's neck habit, and training overriding everything else the way they always did, the way they were supposed to. Pulse. Present. Strong. "Turn him onto his side," Ethan said, and there was nobody else giving instructions, and his voice was calm enough that 2 of the older students moved before they'd decided to rolling Marcus onto his left side the way Ethan directed. "Good. That's good. Keep him there," Marcus groaned. His eyes were open but not focused. He was present. Ethan was certain of that, But he was in the particular disconnected state of a person whose brain was still catching up to the news that the last 2 seconds had delivered. "Does anyone here have medical training?" Ethan asked, looking up at the room. A woman near the back raised her hand. "I'm a nurse." "Would you come up here, please?" She came. She was efficient and competent, and she ran her own quick assessment, while Ethan stepped back and gave her space, because his job was done, and her job was starting, and the difference between those two things mattered. One of the teenage students. The taller of the two, Marcus had positioned as witnesses at the mat's edge, was staring at Ethan with the particular expression of a person who had just seen the world rearrange itself around a fixed point they thought was stable. "Is he going to be okay?" the teenager asked. "He'll be fine," Ethan said. "He'll be sore. He'll be embarrassed, but he'll be fine." He turned away from Marcus entirely. He walked to Noah. His son was still on the bench against the far wall. Jacket held to his chest, watching his father cross the gym floor with the expression of someone witnessing something they didn't have language for yet. Ethan sat down beside him. He didn't say anything immediately. He let the room keep processing around them, the noise beginning to rebuild, parents talking, the nurse calling for someone to bring water, one of the teenage students on a phone. Noah said very quietly, "You barely moved." I mean, he was going really fast and you just..." Noah stopped, started again. "You didn't even look like you were trying." "Trying produces tension," Ethan said. "Tension slows reaction time. The goal is to be precise, not intense." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Where did you learn that?" Ethan looked at his son. "A long time ago. In places I don't usually talk about." "Were you scared?" Noah asked. And the way he asked it, not with a child's fascination, but with the specific, careful concern of a boy who understood that his father was also a person made. Ethan paused before answering. "No," he said honestly. "And that's not something to be proud of. It just means I've been in situations that were genuinely dangerous enough that this," he gestured generally at the gym, "didn't register the same way." Noah took that in, sat with it. Is that a bad thing, that it didn't scare you?" Ethan thought about it. "It means I've spent time around real danger. Whether that's good or bad depends on what you do with it afterward." He looked at his son directly. "The goal isn't to be someone nothing scares. The goal is to be someone who acts correctly even when they're scared. That's the actually difficult thing." Noah nodded slowly. He glanced across the gym at Marcus, who was sitting up now, the nurse beside him, his teenage students crouched at his level. His face was still dazed. He looked smaller than he had 60 seconds ago, significantly smaller. "He called me a crier," Noah said. His voice was flat, not bitter, just factual. "I wasn't crying." "I know you weren't." "He said it anyway." "Yes, he did." "Why would someone do that?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought about all the versions of that answer, the simple ones, the clean ones, the ones designed for children, and decided his son deserved the accurate one. "Because he needed to define you before you could define yourself," Ethan said. "If he could make you the crying kid, then he didn't have to deal with the kid who wasn't impressed by him. People who need to be admired are most threatened by the ones who won't give them what they need." Noah looked at him for a long time. "Is that why he hated me from the first day?" "He didn't hate you, Noah. He was afraid of you." "That doesn't make sense. I'm 10. Power doesn't care about age." Ethan said it simply without weight. "He looked at you on the first night and saw someone who wasn't going to worship him. That terrified him. So he tried to turn it into something he could control: the kid who doesn't belong, the kid who thinks too much, the kid who cries." He paused. None of those were real. They were just the story he needed to tell himself. Noah was quiet for a long time. Around them, the gym was slowly coming back to life. Sound returning, movement. Returning the particular post-shock energy of a room full of people who had witnessed something unexpected and were now trying to decide what it meant. Gerald, the retired Army father, had not moved from his chair. He was watching Ethan Walker with a steady, measuring attention that was not hostile and not worshipful. But somewhere in the careful middle, The attention of a man recognizing something familiar from a distance he'd been close enough to once to understand. Finally, he stood up and walked across the gym. He stopped in front of Ethan and said simply, "Gerald Moore, Army, 2 tours." Ethan looked up, stood, extended his hand. "Ethan Walker." Gerald shook it. "Navy." A pause. Something passed between them that didn't need sound. "Yes." "Figured." Gerald glanced at Marcus, who was on his feet now, moving to the side of the mat with the stiff, careful movement of someone whose body was giving them information they weren't happy to receive. "I thought something was different when you stepped on the mat, the way you stood. The stance is hard to turn off, I'd imagine." Gerald looked at Noah. "This your boy?" "Yes." "Good kid." He said it to Noah directly. "You held yourself together in a tough spot tonight. That matters more than people think." Noah looked at him with those serious eyes. "Thank you." Gerald turned back to Ethan. He seemed to be deciding something. Then, "I know someone who teaches over in Mission Hills. Small program. Runs out of a church gym 3 times a week. Old Marine, not much for the spotlight. Best instructor I've ever seen with kids your son's age." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card. "If you're looking for somewhere else to take him." Ethan took the card, looked at it briefly. "I appreciate it. He's not flashy," Gerald said. "He won't put Noah on Instagram. He'll just make him harder to break." He nodded once, the nod of a man who'd said what he came to say. "Have a good evening." He walked back to his chair where a boy of about 12 was waiting for him with wide, interested eyes. Ethan looked at the card for a moment. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. Noah watched him do it. "Are we going to go?" "Probably yes." "Good." And then after a pause, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why didn't you fight back sooner, like when he was fast at the beginning? You kept not hitting him. Why?" Ethan thought about how to answer that accurately. "Because every time you throw a strike, you're making a statement about the situation. I wanted to make sure I understood the situation before I made a statement." Noah frowned slightly. "That's kind of like what you say about arguments. Same principle. You say the person who speaks first in an argument is usually the one who's least sure they're right. Because they need the noise to feel certain." Noah looked across at Marcus again, then back at his father. "He talked a lot." "He did." "He was scared the whole time." Ethan looked at his son. Sometimes the boy cut to the center of a thing with a precision that was startling. "Yes, I think he probably was." "Is that sad?" Ethan considered it genuinely. "A little bit, yes. But he hurt you though, the ribs. You're holding your left side." Ethan had not been aware he was doing that. He moved his hand. "I'm fine." "Dad." "Bruised at most. I've had worse from furniture." Noah made a sound that was halfway to a laugh. "From furniture?" "Your grandmother's dining table 2009. I was carrying it up a staircase alone because I was 22 and stupid." This time, Noah actually laughed. Brief and genuine, the kind of laugh that surprised you. It released something in the atmosphere between them, the tension of the last hour giving way at the seams. Across the gym, Marcus had found a chair and was sitting in it with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. His 2 teenage students were beside him, unsure what their role was, unsure what the script for this moment required. Neither of them seemed to be finding anything useful to say. One of them kept glancing over at Ethan, then away, then back again. The nurse was speaking quietly to Marcus. Ethan couldn't hear what she was saying, but her posture was professional and kind. The posture of someone who separated their job from their opinion about the patient, which was the right way to do it. Diane appeared at Ethan's elbow. She was carrying her daughter Priya's equipment bag over one shoulder, which meant they were also leaving, which Ethan noted without comment. "I want to say something," Diane said, "and I'm going to try to say it without making it weird." Ethan waited. "My daughter has been coming here for 14 months, she said. She's genuinely good. Her combinations—" She stopped, restarted. "He never acknowledged her, not once. And I let it go because I thought maybe that was just his style. Maybe the not praising was the point. Maybe it made her tougher. She looked across the room at Marcus. And then I watched you on that mat tonight, and I thought that's what actual toughness looks like. And it doesn't look anything like what he's been selling. Ethan didn't say anything. He wasn't sure a response was required. So, Diane shifted the bag on her shoulder. Thank you. For staying. For not walking out when he said those things. She looked at Noah. Your dad is a remarkable man. Noah looked at his father with a small, complicated expression. Yeah, he said. He's okay. Ethan kept a straight face. Deeply appreciated. Diane almost smiled. Then she was gone, guiding Priya toward the exit, and the space they'd occupied filled again with the ambient sound of the gym processing its own aftermath. Noah was still looking at him. She called you remarkable. She did. Do you feel remarkable? Ethan stood up, picked up his jacket from his son's lap, and shrugged it on. His left side protested. He kept his face neutral. I feel like a man who is going to put ice on his ribs and then make spaghetti for dinner. We don't have spaghetti. Then I'll feel like a man who makes a grocery list. Noah stood too, pulling his equipment bag over his shoulder. They moved toward the exit together, the way they always moved, Ethan half a step ahead, not controlling, just positioned, present, at the door. Ethan paused. He looked back. Marcus had lifted his face from his hands. He was looking across the gym, and his eyes found Ethan's at the door, and the two men held that contact for a moment that had no performance in it, from either direction, no anger, no triumph, no accusation. Just two men at the end of something on opposite sides of a lesson that only one of them had needed to learn tonight. Ethan held the door open for his son. They walked out into the evening air of San Diego, and the door closed behind them, and inside the gym, Marcus Vane sat in his chair and stared at the mat where he'd been very certain not 20 minutes ago that he was the most dangerous person in the room. He sat there for a long time after most of the lights went off. Outside, Noah looked up at the sky and said, Spaghetti would actually be really good right now. We'll find something. They crossed the parking lot together. Their footsteps made the same sound on the asphalt, father's heavier son's quicker. The evening was cool and clean, and the kind of ordinary that felt significant after something extraordinary. The way ordinary always felt in the immediate aftermath of moments that changed the shape of things. Noah stopped at the passenger door of the truck. Dad. Yeah. That girl, Priya, the fast one. What about her? She should get a better instructor. He said it simply with the plain conviction of someone stating a fact that was obvious enough to require no argument. She's good. She deserves someone who actually sees that. Ethan looked at his son over the roof of the truck. You're right, he said. She does. They got in. Ethan started the engine. He could feel the bruise on his left side sharpening now that the adrenaline had finished metabolizing. Not serious. He'd cataloged the impact correctly when it happened, and his assessment hadn't changed, but real enough to require ice, and probably a couple of days of patience. He backed out of the parking space. Noah was already on his phone, presumably checking something with the focus of a child who had moved on from the emotional weight of the evening with a speed that Ethan occasionally envied. Processing velocity. Noah had always had it. But after a minute, he put the phone down. And then he said quietly, not looking up from his lap, I didn't cry, Dad. Ethan looked straight ahead at the road. I know. Even when I hit the mat, even when it was hard to breathe, I didn't cry. I know, son. He said I did, but I didn't. He was wrong, Ethan said. He was wrong about that, and he was wrong about the other things, and he used your name like a punchline in front of people who deserved better, and none of that reflected anything true about you. Not one single thing. Noah was quiet. You know that, right? Ethan asked. That none of it was true. After a moment, I know. Does knowing it feel different from feeling it? A long pause. Yeah, kind of. That gap between knowing and feeling, that's the work, Ethan said. That's the real work, not the kicks and the blocks, not the sparring. Closing that gap. Learning to feel the truth of yourself even when someone loud is telling you a different story. Noah was quiet for so long that that Ethan thought he might not respond. Then, "Is that something you had to learn too?" Ethan thought of dark places, of mornings that started before there was light, of voices, instructors, officers, the internal voice that is the harshest critic of all, that had told him versions of a story about himself that were designed to break him down before building him back up, and the voices that were simply designed to break. He thought of learning the difference. "Yeah," he said. "I had to learn it too." "How long did it take?" "Still working on it." Noah turned that over. "You still." Everyone is Noah. The people who tell you they've finished, who say they've got themselves fully figured out and the work is done, those are the ones to be most careful around. He glanced sideways. The work doesn't finish. You just get better at doing it without being embarrassed that it needs doing. Noah was looking at him now. Is that what Marcus's problem was? He thought the work was done. Noah looked out the window at the passing street. Like tonight. Like tonight. They drove in silence for a few minutes. The city moved past them. Streetlights, storefronts, other lives moving at their own speeds in other directions. Somewhere behind them, in a gym that still smelled of rubber and disinfectant, a man was sitting with his face in his hands for the second time in 20 minutes, and the lesson he was beginning to absorb was the most expensive one he'd ever paid for. Noah said quietly, "Dad, I want to learn, like really learn. Not just the moves, the other thing, the work." Ethan looked at him. "The closing the gap thing," Noah clarified. "I want to learn that." The light ahead turned red. Ethan stopped the truck. He looked at his son in the glow from the dashboard, at those dark, careful eyes, and that stubborn jaw, and the oversized hoodie that was better for thinking at the person being assembled in front of him, from the best and the hardest pieces of two people who had loved each other and then couldn't stay together, and who had left behind this one extraordinary result. "You're already learning it," Ethan said. "You've been learning it every time he said something designed to make you small and you stayed standing. Every time he used your name to get a laugh and you didn't let it change the way you held yourself. You think that wasn't training?" He shook his head. "That was the hardest training there is." The light turned green. Ethan drove, and beside him, Noah straightened almost imperceptibly, the kind of straightening that happens from the inside out, and he looked out through the windshield at the road ahead, with the particular quality of someone who has just been told something true about themselves and is beginning slowly and carefully to let themselves believe it. They stopped at the grocery store. They bought spaghetti. The spaghetti was good. That was the thing Ethan held on to the next morning when he woke at 5:15 with his left side aching and the particular clarity that came from sleeping lighter than usual. Not bad sleep, just watchful sleep, the kind his body defaulted to when something unresolved was still moving through his system. He lay still for a few minutes, cataloging the bruise, deciding it was what he'd assessed it to be the night before. Bruised, not broken. He'd broken ribs before, and they announced themselves differently, with a sharp, specific authority that left no room for debate. This was manageable. He got up, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen counter in the early dark, while the neighborhood outside was still quiet, and he thought about the card Gerald Moore had given him. He'd set it on the counter before bed. He picked it up now and read it again in the kitchen light. A name, Raymond Okafor, a phone number, and a single line underneath Mission Hills Community Gym. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. No website, no tagline, no promises. He put the card back on the counter and drank his coffee. At 6:40, Noah came downstairs in his oversized hoodie and the separate sweatpants that apparently constituted acceptable morning attire for a 10-year-old. And he looked at his father with the cautious assessment of someone checking conditions before committing to the day's emotional weather. "How's your side?" Noah asked. "Fine." "You're standing slightly to the right." Ethan straightened. "Fine." "Dad." "Manageable." Different from fine. Manageable. Noah poured himself a glass of orange juice and sat at the table. He picked up the card from where Ethan had left it, read it, set it back down. He didn't ask about it. He'd ask when he was ready, which was how Noah operated. He gathered information first and brought questions later when they'd been properly formed. They ate breakfast. Noah had cereal. Ethan had eggs and didn't admit that cracking them had been mildly unpleasant on the left side. Normalcy was the right container for the morning after an abnormal evening, and they were both instinctively reaching for it. It was Noah who broke it. "How many people did he do that to?" he asked, not looking up from his cereal. Ethan set his fork down. "Do what to? What he did to me. The throwing in front of people thing, the laughing at mistakes thing. How many kids went through that before we showed up?" Ethan thought about how to answer accurately without speculating beyond what he knew. "I don't know the exact number, but from what I saw over those 3 weeks, the way the other students reacted to his corrections, the way they'd already learned to make themselves smaller when he looked at them, I'd say it was most of them." Over time, Noah's spoon stopped moving. "That's a lot of kids." "Yes. And their parents just let it happen. Most of them probably didn't see it the way I did. When you're watching your own child in a class, you watch your child. You're not running pattern analysis on the instructor's behavior across every student interaction." He paused. "I was watching with different eyes. Because of what you used to do." "Because of what I used to do," Ethan confirmed. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Does it bother you that it took this long for someone to do something?" The honest answer was yes, but the full answer was more complicated. "It bothers me that those kids carried it that long," he said. "It doesn't bother me that I was the one who ended up being there. Sometimes the right person ends up in the right room at the right time, not because of luck, but because of how many wrong rooms they passed through first." Noah looked at him for a long moment. Then he went back to his cereal. But his posture had changed. The question had been answered well enough, and his body had released something it had been holding. At 7:50, Ethan drove him to school. He watched his son walk through the front doors, and before the door closed, Noah turned and looked back at him in a way that didn't require interpretation. It was the look of a kid who was carrying something new, not heavy, not light, but real. Something that had been added to the architecture of who he was. Ethan waited until the door closed. Then he pulled out of the school lot and went to the gym, not Titan Combat Academy, a different one, a commercial facility 2 miles from their house, where he held a membership he used primarily for the weight room and the pool. He swam for 40 minutes, favoring his left side in ways he would have found embarrassing in other contexts, but that were simply pragmatic now. And then he sat in the locker room after and called Gerald Moore. Gerald picked up on the second ring. "Moore." "Gerald, Ethan Walker, from last night." "I remember." A pause. "How's the ribs?" "Bruised. I've had worse from furniture." Gerald made a sound that might have been a laugh. "My wife's dining table nearly ended me in 2018. Solid oak. She wasn't sympathetic. My grandmother's was mahogany. The worst kind." A brief pause. "Calling about Raymond. Wanted to know more before I reach out." "Fair." Gerald seemed to settle in on the other end of the line. "Raymond Okafor, he's 51, was Force Recon 2 tours and Fallujah 1 in Afghanistan. Came back in one piece, but not entirely in one piece if you follow. He started this program at Mission Hills, maybe 6 years ago, working with at-risk kids at first, then it expanded. He doesn't advertise. Most of his students come through word of mouth or from parents like me." "What's his methodology?" "He teaches the way I imagine the people who trained you taught you," Gerald said. "Which is to say quietly, precisely, and with the full understanding that what he's actually building is not fighters. It's people who can handle pressure without losing themselves." Ethan sat with that for a moment. "Does he work with younger kids?" Noah's 10. "He's got students as young as 8. He's good with that age range, especially boys who've been told by someone else that they're less than they are." Another pause. "I got the impression last night that your son had been through some of that recently." 3 weeks worth. 3 weeks is enough to do damage. Gerald said it without dramatizing it. Just fact. "Raymond will know what to look for. I'll call him. He won't answer. Leave a message. He calls back in his own time." "Understood." Ethan paused. "Gerald, last night I want to make sure I ask directly. Is there anything I should know about the legal or community fallout from what happened? I wasn't looking to create a situation." A long pause on Gerald's end. Not hesitation, consideration. "I've been doing some asking around this morning," Gerald said finally. Quietly. "A few of the parents from last night have already been in contact with each other. The consensus is that what happened was a long time coming. There's talk about the gym's licensing, about formal complaints that apparently never went anywhere before." He paused again. "The word I keep hearing is, finally." Ethan said nothing. "You didn't create a situation," Gerald said. "You resolved one that already existed. There's a difference. Not everyone sees it that way. The people who matter do." They ended the call. Ethan sat in the empty locker room for another minute. Then he dialed Raymond Okafor's number, got voicemail. Left a brief message, his name, Noah's age, Gerald's name as a reference, and a 2-sentence description of what they were looking for. He kept it clear and direct and without embellishment, because that was the kind of message he would have wanted to receive. Then he drove home, iced his ribs for 20 minutes, and spent the rest of the morning doing the contract work that paid for the house and the groceries and the spaghetti. Raymond Okafor called back at 2:17 in the afternoon. "Your message was the shortest one I've received all year," Raymond said. His voice was lower than Ethan expected, and more measured, the voice of a man who didn't speak to fill space. "Most parents give me a full case file. You only needed the relevant information." A brief pause. "Gerald said you were Navy." "Yes." "SEAL." "Yes." "Medic." Ethan's eyebrows went up slightly. "Gerald did more talking than I realized. Gerald talks when he trusts someone. He doesn't otherwise. I've known him 11 years, and I can count the calls on 2 hands." Raymond paused. "Bring your son Saturday, 7 a.m. We don't start at 7. I start at 7. Students show up at 7:30. Come early so I can meet you both before. We'll be there. One more thing." Raymond's voice didn't change in register, but something in it sharpened slightly. "Whatever happened to him, whatever was said to him, he'll bring it into my gym. That's fine. That's expected. But I need to know if he's the kind of kid who's decided to believe it, or the kind who hasn't decided yet." Ethan thought about Noah at the kitchen table that morning. About the question his son had asked, how many kids did he do that to, and the way the question itself had been oriented outward rather than inward. Not what does this mean about me, but how many others were hurt. "He hasn't decided yet," Ethan said. "He's working through it." "Good," Raymond said. "That's the window. Bring him Saturday." The line went quiet. Ethan set his phone down and looked at the card on the counter for a long moment. Then he put it in the drawer where he kept things that had been resolved. What he didn't know, what none of them knew yet, on that Wednesday afternoon while Noah was in school, and Ethan was icing his ribs, and Marcus Vane was sitting in his office at Titan Combat Academy with 2 Advil and a towel pressed to the back of his neck, was that the story was not finished. It had barely started. Because that same Wednesday afternoon at 3:48 p.m., a 17-second video clip appeared on the internet. The clip had been taken on a phone by a parent in the 3rd row of the chairs. It showed 21 seconds of the sparring match, not the full match, just the end of it. Marcus attacking Ethan, moving one punch, Marcus going down. The clip had no audio. It didn't need any. Whoever posted it had added a single line of caption text: "Black belt challenged the wrong dad at our kids' martial arts gym tonight." By Wednesday evening, it had 14,000 views. By Thursday morning, it had 230,000. Ethan found out because Noah texted him from school at 10:14 a.m. on Thursday. A single text that read, "Dad, are you aware that you're on the internet?" Not a question, just a statement delivered with the flat precision of someone who had discovered something enormous and was practicing the art of not overreacting about it. Ethan called him immediately. "Are you in class?" "Study hall." "Dad, there's a video of you at the gym Tuesday night." "I know what happened Tuesday night." "There are comments, a lot of comments." "Don't read the comments." "I've already read some of the comments." "Stop reading the comments." "Dad, someone posted, 'Find out who this man is,' and people are there looking. They're trying to figure out who you are." Ethan sat with that for 2 seconds. "How many people have seen it?" "It says 243,000 views. But that was 5 minutes ago." He set his phone down on the desk, picked it up. "Noah, Go back to study hall. Don't talk to anyone about this. Don't confirm or deny anything. I'll handle it. How are you going to handle the internet? Poorly, probably, but I'll try. Go back to class. Dad. Noah, I love you. Go back to class. A pause. Okay. He hung up and sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Then he picked up his phone, called Gerald Moore. Gerald answered immediately. I was about to call you. You've seen it. My son sent it to me at breakfast. I've had 3 people text me this morning asking if I know the man in the video. What did you tell them? That I met him once, and he seemed like a decent man. A pause. Ethan, it's going fast. Someone in a veterans forum identified you from the general description, San Diego former Navy security consultant, single father. They haven't got your full name yet, but they're close. Ethan stood up. Close like hours or close like minutes? Hours, maybe. Depends on who's looking. Gerald paused. How do you want to handle this? I want my son not to become a story. Understood. Another pause, longer this time. Here's the problem. You're already a story. The question now is which story you are, the one other people write or the one you write yourself. The line was quiet for a moment. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and went silent. There's a reporter, Gerald said slowly. Woman named Claire Ashford. Does features for the San Diego Union Tribune. Veteran Affairs Community Stories. She's good. I mean actually good. Not the kind that burns sources or twists context. My daughter worked with her on a piece 2 years ago. He paused. She's going to find you regardless. It's a question of whether she finds you on you regardless. It's a question of whether she finds you on your terms or someone else's. Ethan said nothing. I can reach out to her, Gerald said. Tell her you're aware of the situation and willing to talk on specific conditions. She'll agree, because the alternative is a worse story with no direct source. What conditions? Noah's name stays out of it. The story is about the gym, the pattern of behavior, the other kids, not your son specifically. His face doesn't appear anywhere. His age doesn't appear anywhere. Ethan thought about it. He thought about the kids he'd seen in that gym. Jason staring at the mat, the fast girl with uncountable talent, who'd never been acknowledged, the dozen children who had learned to make themselves small in a space designed to make them large. He thought about what Gerald had said about formal complaints that apparently never went anywhere. I thought about Raymond Okafor, who had built something quiet and real in a church gym in Mission Hills because the louder version of things had failed the kids who needed them most. Make the call, Ethan said. Gerald made the call. Claire Ashford called Ethan at 4:30 that same afternoon. She had a direct, unhurried quality on the phone that he immediately assessed as competent, the quality of someone who gathered information efficiently because they were genuinely interested in accuracy rather than drama. Mr. Walker, I appreciate you being willing to speak directly. I have conditions. Gerald mentioned. I agree to them. Before we go further, I want to understand what story you're actually trying to tell. Not the video story. Not the one-punch story. A brief pause. The story I'm trying to tell, Claire said carefully, is about a pattern of behavior at a licensed youth martial arts facility that appears to have been tolerated for an extended period, despite warning signs, and what it takes apparently in this case, a significant intervention before that pattern gets addressed. Ethan nodded to himself. And what happened Tuesday night? The inciting incident. The moment the pattern became undeniable. She paused. You're not the protagonist of this story, Mr. Walker. The kids are. He sat back. Okay, he said. Let's talk. They talked for an hour and 20 minutes. Ethan was precise and careful. He gave facts and declined to speculate. He described what he had observed over 3 weeks in specific measurable terms. The incidents, the pattern, the specific session on Tuesday, the throw that was not calibrated, the accusation of crying that was not true. He spoke about the other children. He did not speak about his own history in specific terms, but he also did not deny it when Claire asked carefully whether his background gave him a different frame for evaluating training methodology. Yes, he said simply. I've been trained by people who understood the difference between pressure that builds and pressure that breaks. Tuesday night was the second kind. And when you accepted the challenge, what was the calculation? He thought about how to answer that honestly. I looked around the room, and I realized my son wasn't the first child that man had used as a demonstration. And I knew if I walked out, he wouldn't be the last. That was the calculation. Claire was quiet for a moment. You didn't hesitate at all. I hesitated, Ethan said. The hesitation was the right part. Acting without hesitation in situations like that is how you make mistakes. The hesitation was where I checked whether what I was about to do was actually about the right thing or about my own anger. And I wasn't angry. A pause. No. Anger would have made it worse. It would have made it about me. I needed it to be about the kids in that room. The story ran the following Saturday morning. Front page of the features section, print and digital. Claire had written it exactly as she'd described the children at the center. The pattern of behavior documented through quotes from 4 separate parents who had agreed to be named formal complaints to the city's Recreation Licensing Board that had been filed and had not been acted on, and a single paragraph near the end describing the event on Tuesday night in measured factual terms. Ethan was referred to by name with his permission and described as a former Navy SEAL and security consultant. His son was not named. His son's age was not stated. His son's face did not appear. The response was immediate and substantial. By Sunday morning, Titan Combat Academy's Google reviews had dropped from 4.6 to 2.1. 3 of Marcus's black belt students had posted their own accounts online, not gleefully, but with the careful, deliberate energy of people who had been waiting for a context in which their observations would be received correctly. 2 of them were young women. Both described patterns that matched what Ethan had observed extending back further than 3 weeks. By Monday, the licensing board had opened a formal review. By Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the sparring match, Marcus Vane posted a statement on his social media. It was 4 paragraphs long, and it went through several iterations of language that stopped just short of a direct apology before landing in the 4th paragraph on something that was partially genuine and mostly defensive. The comment section was not kind. Ethan did not read Marcus's statement. He found out about it because Noah mentioned it at dinner on Tuesday evening. He posted something, Noah said. Not with triumph, not with satisfaction, just reporting. I know. Did you read it? No. Noah was quiet for a moment. I did. Ethan waited. He said he had high standards, and sometimes the delivery didn't match the intention. Noah said it with the precise, slightly flat tone of someone quoting language they found inadequate. He said he was going to take time to reflect. Okay. That's not really an apology. No, Ethan agreed. It's not. Does it matter that it's not a real apology? Ethan thought about it. It matters to the people he hurt. Whether he apologizes correctly or not doesn't change anything about the damage. But the damage exists regardless of the apology. The apology is for him. Whether he does it right is about his own accounting. Noah was chewing pasta and thinking. So it matters for his sake. If he's capable of doing it right. Do you think he is? Ethan looked at his son. I think everyone is capable of it if they want to be. The question is whether the wanting comes from actually understanding what they did or just wanting the discomfort to stop. Noah twirled spaghetti around his fork with the focused attention of someone who was thinking about something other than spaghetti. I don't feel better because he posted it. You don't have to feel better because he posted it. But I thought I would. Like when I heard about it, I thought maybe I'd feel something like done, finished. But I just feel the same. Closure doesn't usually come from the other person, Ethan said. That's the thing they don't tell you. You can wait your whole life for someone to say the right thing and feel the exact way you need them to feel, and it almost never happens the way you need it to. The actual closing, the real one, you do it yourself. Noah looked up at him. How? By deciding that what happened to you is part of your story, but not the whole of it. By keeping going. He paused. By showing up Saturday morning at 7 a.m. to meet a man named Raymond Okafor. Noah straightened. That's this Saturday. That's this Saturday. What's he like? I talked to him on the phone. He was direct, and he didn't waste words, and he called back when he said he would. Noah considered this. That's your way of saying you liked him. That's my way of saying I think he's worth meeting. A small pause. I'm nervous. Good, Ethan said simply. Noah frowned. Good. Nervous means you care. Nervous means it matters to you. I'd be more concerned if you walked in there without any nerves at all. It means you're treating it seriously. He paused. The goal isn't to eliminate the nerves. The goal is to go anyway. Noah thought about that for a moment. Then he nodded slowly, the nod of someone integrating a piece of information into the working structure of how they understood things. They finished dinner. Noah did the dishes. They had a rotating sim, and Tuesday was his night, and Ethan dried, and the ordinary domestic rhythm of it was exactly what the evening needed, the particular grounding that came from simple tasks done in familiar proximity with someone you trusted completely. But the story was about to add a layer that neither of them expected. It came at 8:47 p.m. on Thursday in the form of a voicemail. Ethan was in the garage doing a slow inventory of the bicycle parts he'd been meaning to sort for 2 weeks when his phone buzzed with a notification for a missed call and a new voicemail. The number was local, but not one he recognized. He played the message standing between a half-assembled bike frame and a shelf of spare tires. The voice on the voicemail was a woman's, tired but clear. Mr. Walker, my name is Sandra Yates. My son Tyler was a student at Titan Combat Academy for 8 months before I pulled him out in February. He's 12. I've been reading the article, and I've been reading the other parents' accounts online, and I wanted to say something to you directly, rather than I don't know. Rather than just posting something on a forum. A pause. A breath. Tyler didn't tell me what was happening. He stopped telling me things back in December, and I couldn't figure out why. He stopped eating lunch at school. He started faking illness on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I thought it was something at school. I thought it was social issues, friend group things. Her voice tightened slightly. I pulled him from the gym in February because a friend of mine saw something during a parent session and called me afterward. By then, he had started to believe it. The things Marcus told him. About not having what it takes. About being a quitter. He had started to believe them. She stopped. Collected herself. He's doing better now. He's in therapy and he's doing better. But when I read what you did when I watched the clip, I wanted to call and tell you that there's a 12-year-old boy in Claremont who slept better this week than he has in months. Because someone finally saw it clearly. Another pause. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm leaving this as a voicemail. I wanted you to know. Thank you. The message ended. Ethan stood in the garage for a long time. He played it again. He stood there after the second listening with the phone at his side, looking at the half-assembled bicycle and the shelf of parts, and the familiar geometry of this small domestic space that had nothing in it to suggest that the world outside it contained a 12-year-old boy named Tyler who had stopped eating lunch at school and faked illness to avoid 2 days per week, and who was this week sleeping better. There was a sound from inside the house. Noah moving through the hallway upstairs, going from his room to the bathroom in that particular shuffling half-awake walk that meant he was winding down for the night. Ethan set his phone on the workbench. He looked at nothing for a while, and the weight of what one Tuesday evening could mean. The particular reverberating weight of a moment that seemed contained until it sent its ripples into a 12-year-old's sleep pattern and a nurse's assessment and a licensing board's inbox, and a woman named Diane sitting in the third row, watching her daughter finally get acknowledged. That weight settled in Ethan Walker's chest, not as pride, not as vindication, but as something quieter, something that felt like purpose, made retrospectively clear. He'd walked into that gym because Noah needed courage. He'd stayed in that gym because 12 children needed someone to stay. He'd walked onto that mat because Tyler Yates, and every kid like Tyler Yates, deserved to sleep through the night. He hadn't known Tyler's name then. He hadn't known Sandra's voice, or her son's empty lunch table, or the particular shape of the damage being done 2 blocks removed from his line of sight. He hadn't needed to know. He'd needed to see clearly, decide correctly, and act without hesitation at the moment when hesitation would have cost something irreplaceable. And he had. He walked back inside, turned off the garage light, and went upstairs. He stopped at Noah's door. It was slightly open light, off the small sounds of a sleeping child, already present the deep, even breathing, the occasional shift. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he said quietly enough not to wake him, "Good night, son." He went to bed. And for the first time since Tuesday, he slept without any part of himself staying watchful. Saturday came with the particular quality of early mornings in late autumn in San Diego, cool and clean and specific, the kind of morning that was easier to get up for than to sleep through. Ethan was up at 5:30. He made coffee. He made 2 lunches force of habit, even though they were just going across town and wouldn't need them. He made them anyway. At 6:20, he knocked on Noah's door. "I'm awake," came the immediate response from inside. He pushed the door open. Noah was already sitting up in bed, fully awake in the way of someone who had not actually been fully asleep, which Ethan recognized because he knew the look of a mind that had been running through something all night. "You nervous?" Ethan asked. "I said I was nervous on Tuesday. I'm still nervous." "That's consistent." Noah swung his legs off the bed. "What if he's like Marcus?" "He's not." "How do you know you talked to him once?" "I know," Ethan said, "for the same reason I knew within 10 minutes of watching Marcus that Marcus was Marcus. I read people by what they don't say as much as what they do." Raymond said 2 things on the phone that Marcus never said in 3 weeks. Noah looked at him. "What things?" Ethan picked up the hoodie from the floor and handed it to his son. "He asked about you. Not your skill level. Not whether you were fast or strong or had potential. He asked what kind of kid you were. Whether you'd started believing the wrong story about yourself." Noah took the hoodie, held it for a second. "That's it. And he said to come early. Not to be early to come early. So he could meet us as people before he met us as student and parent." Ethan paused. "Marcus never once asked me a question about my son that wasn't about what Noah could do." Raymond's first question was about who Noah was. They drove through the quiet streets of early Saturday San Diego, past the closed storefronts and the joggers and the particular stillness of a city that hadn't quite decided to start yet, and the card that had been in Ethan's drawer was now in his shirt pocket, and the boy in the passenger seat was looking out the window at the passing streets with the focused inward expression of someone doing quiet preparation. At 6:58, they pulled into the parking lot of Mission Hills Community Gym. There was one other car in the lot. A man was standing near the entrance. Big through the shoulders, somewhere in his early 50s, gray at the temples, wearing a plain sweatshirt and old athletic shoes, and the particular quality of stillness that Ethan had recognized in himself, and in very few others, the absolute expensive hard-won stillness of someone who had been in enough places where stillness was survival to have made it permanent. He was watching their car pull in. They got out. Raymond Okafor walked toward them with the unhurried, measured step of someone who arrived at the right moment by design and not by accident, and he stopped in front of Noah first, not Ethan. Noah and crouched down to the boy's level and extended his hand. "You must be Noah," he said. His voice was low and direct, and had nothing in it that was performing anything. "I'm Raymond. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Noah thought about it with the seriousness it deserved. It would if that was the most impressive thing about him. But it's not. Raymond looked at him for a moment. Then he stood up and looked at Ethan with an expression that said everything it needed to say without using any words at all. "Come inside," Raymond said. "I'll put coffee on. We can talk before the others get here." They followed him through the door. The gym was plain and clean and smelled like honest work. There were no trophies on display. There were no photographs. There was a framed quote on the wall near the entrance printed in plain black text on white paper, unpretentious as a grocery list. Noah read it as he passed, and he slowed for just a moment. Ethan looked at it too. It said, "The goal is not to become someone others fear. The goal is to become someone you can trust." Noah didn't say anything. He just walked on through the door after Raymond. But Ethan saw the slight shift in his son's shoulders, that inside-out straightening the same one from the truck 2 weeks ago, and he felt something. He had no precise language for something that was larger than relief and quieter than joy. He walked through the door. Behind him, Saturday morning continued to arrive, patient and certain, the way good things always do, not all at once, but piece by piece, each one adding itself to the last, until eventually you look back and can't remember what the world felt like before them. Raymond Okafor made coffee, the way he did everything else, without ceremony, without commentary, without any of the performative busyness that people use to fill silence they weren't comfortable with. He moved around the small back room of the gym with the economy of someone who had lived in enough austere environments to have permanently shed the habit of unnecessary motion. 3 cups. Coffee. He offered Noah a glass of water without asking, because a 10-year-old at 6:58 in the morning did not need coffee, and Noah accepted it with a quiet thank you that made Raymond glance at Ethan with a look that communicated something brief and complete. They sat at a plain table. Raymond wrapped both hands around his mug. "So," he said. He looked at Noah directly. "Tell me what you're looking for." Noah looked back at him without flinching. "I want to learn how to not feel small when someone is trying to make me feel small." A pause. Raymond nodded once. "That's the most honest answer I've gotten from a student in probably 3 years. My dad says honest answers are faster." "Your dad's right." Raymond glanced at Ethan. "Most kids come in here and tell me they want to be strong or they want to fight. And that's fine. That's the surface of it. But underneath, it's always the same thing you just said. They want to stop feeling small." He looked back at Noah. "You already understand what you actually want. That puts you ahead." "Ahead of what?" "Ahead of where most people are when they walk through that door." He took a sip of coffee. "I had a student 2 years ago, 14 years old, came in with his arms crossed and his chin up and told me he wanted to be the best fighter in San Diego. I asked him why. He said because nobody would mess with him anymore. I asked him who was messing with him. He wouldn't answer." Raymond set his mug down. "We spent 4 months just on that question before we ever threw a punch. By the time we got to the actual training, he was a different person, not harder, clearer." Noah was watching him with that total, unblinking attention. "Did he get good?" "He got excellent. He competed last spring, won 3 of 4 matches." Raymond paused. "But the win he cared about most didn't happen on a mat." "What happened?" "His father came to watch him train one Saturday. The man had never come before, never shown up, not once in 4 months. And when he walked in the door, this kid who'd been terrified of his father's opinion his entire life, he just kept training. He didn't stop, didn't look over, didn't perform. He just kept doing the work." Raymond's voice was steady and direct. "Afterward, his father said, 'You've changed.' And the kid said, 'No, I can just see myself clearly now.' That was the win." The room was quiet for a moment. Noah said quietly, "I want that." "Then let's build it," Raymond said. He stood up. "Come on. I'll show you around before the others get here." He led them out of the back room and into the main gym space, and the first thing Ethan noticed was what wasn't there. No trophies on shelves, no photographs of victories, no championship banners. The walls held only 2 things: the framed quote near the entrance that Noah had read coming in, and a simple hand-lettered sign near the training area that read, "Leave better than you arrived." That was it. Raymond moved them through the space with a few sentences about the structure of the program. 3 sessions per week, mixed ages in the same class, because Raymond believed younger students learned something essential from watching older ones work through difficulty, and older students learned something equally essential from being asked to explain what they knew in terms a 10-year-old could follow. Teaching is how you find out what you actually understand versus what you think you understand, Raymond said. He paused near the mat area and looked at Noah. "I'm going to ask you to teach things before you feel ready to teach them. That's by design." Noah frowned slightly. "What if I teach it wrong? Then we correct it together, and you learn it twice, as well as you would have if I'd just told you the first time." He said it simply with no drama. "There's no such thing as a mistake in this gym. There's only information." Ethan watched his son absorb that. Watched the slight recalibration in Noah's posture, something loosening in the set of his shoulders that had been there since before Tuesday night, that had probably been there since the first week at Titan Combat Academy. At 7:28, the other students began arriving. 6 of them, ranging from 8 to 15, filtering in with the comfortable ease of people entering a space they felt safe in. They greeted Raymond with straightforward respect, not the stiff performance-oriented deference that Ethan had watched Marcus's students practice, but the easy acknowledgement of someone they trusted. A couple of them acknowledged Noah with brief nods the way kids do when they're trying to be welcoming without making it a production. Chloe considered this seriously. Yelling is about the person doing the yelling. The safety thing was about Jamie. Noah looked at her for a moment. "You're 8, 8.5, she said with the precision of someone for whom the half was significant. "That's a really accurate description of something," Noah said. Chloe nodded satisfied and went to put her bag down. Ethan watched from the edge of the room where Raymond had gestured him toward the chairs, fewer than Titan Combat Academy's parent section. Plainer, positioned in a way that was present but not performative. Not a theater arrangement. Just chairs. He sat. He watched. And what he watched for the next 90 minutes was different enough from Titan Combat Academy that the comparison was almost uncomfortable, like holding up 2 versions of the same word in different languages, where one version carried weight and history, and the other was a hollow sound that only resembled language from a distance. Raymond taught the way. Ethan's best instructors had taught by asking before telling, by letting the student arrive at the edge of understanding through their own movement before providing the bridge. He corrected privately when he could, and publicly only when the correction itself was the lesson for the whole group. He gave praise specifically, and without inflation, not "good job" as a verbal pat, but the precise identification of the exact thing that had been done well, because that precision was what told the student their effort had been actually seen, not just generally acknowledged. Haimada Noah spar with Chloe in the last 20 minutes of the session, not competitively. He framed it as a conversation, 2 people having a physical conversation where the goal was listening as much as speaking. Noah was bigger and older, which Raymond accounted for with specific instructions to both of them, and what happened in those 20 minutes was tentative and imperfect, and punctuated by Raymond's quiet voice, making adjustments, and it was the most alive Ethan had seen his son look in a training environment since this whole thing started. At the end of the session, Raymond dismissed the other students and kept Noah for 5 minutes. He sat across from him on the mat legs, crossed the same posture as the student, which was itself a statement about what this conversation was and wasn't. "First session," Raymond said. "What did you learn?" Noah thought about it. "My left side is slower than my right." "Why?" "I favor my right because it's stronger, so my left doesn't get pushed as hard." "What does that mean for your training?" Noah worked through it. "I have to do the hard thing more. Use my left even when my right is easier." "And what's the bigger lesson in that?" A pause. "The thing you're worse at doesn't get better by avoiding it." Raymond nodded once. "What else?" "Chloe is better than me at listening. She reads movement before I do. I'm still trying to think about what she's going to do instead of just responding." "That's the work," Raymond said. "The thinking is stage 1. You can't skip it. But eventually the thinking gets quiet and the body takes over, and that transition is different for every person, and you can't force it. You just keep showing up until it happens." He looked at Noah steadily. "You will show up." "Yes," Noah said, without hesitation. "Good." Raymond stood, extended his hand. "Then I'll see you Thursday." Noah shook it, stood straighter. They drove home with the windows down, despite the cool air, because Noah had asked for them down, without giving a reason, and Ethan didn't need one. The morning had a quality to it, something opened and clean, and they drove through it without talking for several minutes, the comfortable silence of people who had been through something together and didn't need to narrate it to each other immediately. Eventually Noah said, "He's nothing like Marcus." "No." He corrected Chloe's stance 3 times, and she looked more confident each time, not less. Noah paused. "How does that work?" "Because he corrected the movement, not the person." She walked away, knowing her stance was improvable. She didn't walk away feeling like she was improvable. Noah absorbed that. There's a difference. A significant one. Another long pause. The city moved past them. Dad, Noah said, can I ask you something about your time in the military? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. You can ask. I'll answer what I can. Did you ever have a Raymond like someone who taught you that way? A pause. He hadn't been asked that before, hadn't thought about it in those terms. Yes, he said after a moment. A man named Chief Petty Officer Daniel Reyes. I was 24. He was 42, and he'd been in places that would have broken most people, and he had this quality of stillness, the same thing Raymond has. He paused. I saw Raymond standing in the parking lot this morning, and I thought about Danny Reyes for the first time in years. What happened to him? A beat. He died, 2011, IED. The car was quiet. I'm sorry, Noah said. So am I. Ethan said it simply. He was the kind of person whose absence makes the world different. Not just for the people who knew him. For the people who would have known him and didn't get the chance. Noah was quiet for a while. Do you think Raymond knows he's that kind of person? Ethan thought about it. I think he'd deflect the question, which is usually the sign that the answer is yes. They got home. Noah went upstairs to shower, moving with the slightly sore looseness of a body that had been worked for the first time in a new way, and Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his second cup of coffee of the morning, and the particular quiet of a Saturday that was working out the way Saturdays were supposed to. His phone rang at 10:43. The number was unknown. San Diego area code. He answered. Walker. Mr. Walker. A man's voice. Controlled but effortful. The control was something being maintained, not something that came naturally in this moment. My name is Marcus Vane. Ethan said nothing. He set his coffee mug down. Marcus stopped, started again. I got your number from a mutual contact. I'm sorry for calling without warning. I can hang up if you'd prefer. I haven't told you to hang up, Ethan said. Ethan looked at the table, at his coffee mug, at the grain of the wood his grandmother had given him from her kitchen when she downsized in 2019. He thought about Sandra Yates's voicemail, about Tyler, 12 years old, sleeping better this week. Say what you need to say, Ethan said. Marcus was quiet for 3 full seconds. I hurt your son. I hurt him deliberately in front of people because he didn't give me what I needed, and I used my position to punish him for it. And I've spent the last week telling myself that it was about high standards and competitive training philosophy and all of the language I had for it, and none of it was true. His voice was tight, not breaking, but pressured from the inside. I used a 10-year-old to feel better about myself. And there's no version of that I can make acceptable. It just is what it is. Ethan was quiet. I don't know what I'm asking for, Marcus said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I've earned the right to ask for that yet. I'm asking, I don't know. Maybe I'm just asking you to know that I understand what I actually did. Not the version where my standards were too high. The real version. Ethan said, do you know why it happened? Not the technical explanation, the real one. A long pause. I think I built my whole identity around being the most capable person in the room. And your son walked in on the first night and just looked at me. Like I was someone he was still deciding about. And something about that felt like a threat. Like if he didn't need me to be impressive, then maybe... He stopped. Maybe I wasn't. And the solution was to make him smaller. Yes. The word came out stripped of everything. No defense, just admission. Ethan sat with that for a moment. The solution you chose made you exactly what you were afraid of being, he said. Not impressive. Someone who needed a child's fear to feel capable. Silence on the line. Yeah, Marcus said. His voice was lower now. I know. Have you talked to a therapist? A surprised pause. No, not yet. Talk to one, Ethan said. It wasn't a suggestion. It had the weight of a direct recommendation from someone who had seen what happened to people who didn't, who had sat with teammates in cold rooms on the other side of the world, and watched what the unprocessed version of this kind of wound did when it was left to operate without examination. Not for the licensing board, not for the public statement, for you. Because what you described, needing to be the most powerful person in every room, using other people's diminishment as fuel that doesn't go away because you had a hard week and felt bad about it. It requires actual work. Another pause. I know. Do you? Yes, I think so. A breath. I've been training for 20 years. I know what happens when you avoid the thing that needs attention. It doesn't get better. It just gets worse and learns to hide better. Same principle, Ethan said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, your son, is he okay? Ethan thought about Noah on the mat that morning, listening with his whole body, teaching himself to stop predicting and start responding. About the 8.5-year-old who explained the difference between yelling and a safety correction with perfect accuracy. About Raymond Okafor's quiet, I'll see you Thursday. He's going to be better than okay, Ethan said. A beat. That's I'm glad. Marcus said it with the particular care of someone handling something fragile. That genuinely I'm glad. They were quiet for a moment. Then Ethan said, Marcus, the statement you're trying to write. 11 versions, and they all sound like PR. You know why? Why? Because you're writing toward the audience. Stop writing toward the audience. Write the 12th version and address it to Tyler Yates. A long pause. I don't know who that is. You do, Ethan said. You know exactly who that is. You just don't know his name. Find the Tyler Yates in your mind, the one you can see most clearly when you're honest with yourself about what you did, and write the apology to him. Not to your reputation, not to the licensing board, to him. The line was silent for what felt like a long time. Okay, Marcus said finally. His voice was different from when he'd called. Still controlled, but without the effort. Something had released. Okay, I'll do that. Good. Mr. Walker, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know the call doesn't. I know it's not. It's a start, Ethan said. A start is not nothing. The line went quiet again. Then Marcus said, Thank you for picking up. Yeah, Ethan said. The call ended. He sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. He thought about what Gerald had said on Thursday, which story, you are the one other people write, or the one you write yourself. He thought about Raymond Okafor writing nothing at all on his walls except 2 sentences, both of them pointing forward. He thought about Daniel Reyes, dead in 2011, whose quality of stillness had shown up this morning in a parking lot in Mission Hills and had recognized itself across 30 feet. The things that mattered moved forward through people. That was the mechanism. That was how it worked. Not through monuments or statements or videos that accumulated views. Through people who carried the lesson and put it down somewhere the next person could pick it up. Noah came downstairs at 11:15 in clean clothes and the big hoodie hair still damp, moving with the particular looseness of a body that had been well worked. He stopped when he saw his father's expression. What happened? He asked. Marcus called. Noah went still. Called you here? 10 minutes ago. Noah sat down slowly across from his father. His face was doing the careful inward processing thing. What did he say? Ethan told him. Not the exact words, some of it felt private in a way he wanted to honor, but the shape of it. The 11 failed statements, the admission, the recognition of what had actually happened and why. Noah listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, Noah sat quietly for a moment. Do you believe him? He asked. I think he believes himself right now, Ethan said. Whether that holds, whether he does the actual work, I don't know. Neither does he yet. That's the honest answer. Did you forgive him? Ethan looked at his son. I didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't what the call was about. He wasn't asking for it. What was he asking for? Noah looked down at the table. Do you think I should forgive him? Ethan was careful. I think forgiveness is yours to give or not give in whatever timeline it happens in, if it happens at all. And I think it doesn't have anything to do with him getting better or not getting better. Those are separate things. He paused. Forgiving someone isn't saying what they did was okay. It's deciding that you're not going to carry the weight of their action inside your own chest anymore. That's for you, not for them. Noah was quiet for a long time. I don't think I'm there yet, he said finally. You don't have to be. But I think I want to be. Eventually. Because the carrying it thing. He touched his sternum briefly. I can feel it, like something sitting here. That's honest, Ethan said. Is that what forgiveness feels like when it happens? Like that thing lifting? That's close to it. Noah nodded slowly. They sat together in the quiet of the kitchen, and the Saturday morning continued to move around them. Sounds from outside the neighbor's dog, a car starting somewhere up the block. All the ordinary noise of a neighborhood, in the ordinary middle of an ordinary day, that felt to both of them specific in a way ordinary days rarely were. At 12:30, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from a number he now recognized, Gerald Moore. 3 words. Have you seen this, and a link? He opened it. The San Diego Union Tribune had published a follow-up to Claire Ashford's original piece. The licensing board's formal review had moved faster than anyone had expected. Sources inside the review process, according to the article, had indicated that the complaint file on Titan Combat Academy was substantially larger than had been publicly known. 14 separate written complaints over 3 years. Most of them submitted by parents who had not known about the others, most of them describing variations of the same pattern. The review board had met on Friday afternoon. A decision was expected within the next 2 weeks. Claire had also included a new paragraph near the end of the piece. It mentioned, without naming him, that a former student of the Academy, male 12 years old, had been receiving therapeutic support since February, following what his mother described as a significant deterioration in his confidence and emotional well-being, directly attributable to his time at the gym. The mother was not named. The son was not named. But the paragraph was precise and factual, and it sat in the article like a quiet weight. Ethan read it twice, then he put his phone down. Dad, Noah had looked up from where he'd been reading something at the other end of the table. What is it? The licensing board is moving, formally reviewing the gym. He paused. They found 14 complaints going back 3 years. Noah was very still. 14. 14 written ones. There are probably more that were never formalized. Because systems move slowly. Because one parent's complaint sounds like one parent's grievance until there are 14 of them. Because the gym had good reviews and a social media presence, and an instructor who photographed well and said the right things in public contexts. He paused. Because the kids it was happening to were 10, 12 years old, and kids that age often don't tell their parents everything, because they're still working out how to understand what's happening themselves. Noah absorbed that. His jaw was doing the stubborn thing, the thing that was his father's jaw, and his father's stubbornness, translated into a 10-year-old's face. Like Tyler. Ethan looked at him. You know about Tyler. I read the article Thursday night when you were in the garage. I saw the paragraph about the 12-year-old. He looked at his father directly. That's Tyler, right? From Sandra Yates's voicemail. Ethan paused. You heard the voicemail. I was at the top of the stairs. Your phone volume was up. A pause. I'm sorry. I should have said something. It's okay. Ethan looked at his son. Yes, that's Tyler. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, he stopped eating lunch. Yes. At school, because of what Marcus did to him. Yes. Noah's throat moved. I didn't stop eating. It didn't get that bad for me. He said it with the careful awareness of someone counting their own luck. But I can feel where it could have gone. If we'd stayed longer. If you hadn't seen it. You would have told me, Ethan said. At some point you would have told me. Maybe. Noah didn't sound certain. But maybe not soon enough. But you kept seeing. You didn't stop trusting your own reading of the situation, even when the room was telling you Marcus was excellent. Ethan paused. That's the hardest thing. Trusting your own perception when the environment is telling you a different story. You did that. You never stopped doing that. Noah was quiet for a long time. Then slowly something in his face changed, a shift that was internal and real and had nothing performed about it. Not pride exactly. Something more like recognition. The look of someone being shown a version of themselves that they'd been too close to see. "The fast girl," he said suddenly. "Priya. What about her? Is she going to go to Raymond's? Gerald does, or Diane might reach out to Claire for the story." Noah's focus was absolute. "Priya is really good, Dad. She's legitimately good, and she spent 14 months in a place where someone decided she was invisible. Raymond would see her in the first 5 minutes. I watched him this morning. He would see exactly what she is, and he would acknowledge it, and she would know that she's been seen. And she needs that." He paused. "I could feel it watching her perform that combination. She knew it was good. She kept looking to see if anyone noticed." Ethan looked at his son for a long moment. At this 10-year-old who had spent the past 3 weeks being systematically diminished, and had emerged from it with his sight intact enough to look across a room and see the same thing happening to someone else, and to care about it enough to bring it to the table. "I'll reach out to Gerald," Ethan said. "See if he can connect us to Diane." Noah nodded, satisfied. He pulled his hoodie sleeves down over his hands in the way he did when he was thinking. "Dad," he said, "do you think Raymond would let me bring Tyler sometime? Sandra said he's doing better. But better isn't the same as good." The question sat in the kitchen between them. Ethan looked at his son. At this person assembled from the hardest and the best pieces of two people, at this person who had been thrown onto a mat and told he was crying when he wasn't, and who had walked out of that gym 3 weeks ago and arrived this morning in a parking lot in Mission Hills and shaken a man's hand and said clearly and honestly what he was looking for. "I'll ask him," Ethan said. Thursday, when we go back." Noah nodded again, pulled his hoodie cuffs further down. "Okay." They sat together in the quiet kitchen for another minute. Outside, the Saturday afternoon was beginning to assert itself, warmer, brighter the day, finding its full weight. From upstairs came the particular silence of a house that felt more inhabited than empty, even when only 2 people were in it. Then Noah said, "I think I want to write Tyler a letter." Ethan was quiet. "I thought about Chief Petty Officer Daniel Reyes, 42 years old, who had sat across from a 24-year-old Ethan Walker, in the kind of context that had no pleasant framing, and said with complete and genuine conviction, 'You are not what this place is trying to make you. Hold on to that.' 3 sentences. Delivered once. Still running in Ethan Walker's chest 22 years later. Still legible on the mornings when he needed to read something true about himself. 3 sentences from a man who had no reason to say them, except that he'd looked at a young man and decided the true thing needed to be said. "Write the letter," Ethan said. Noah reached across the table for the notepad and pen they kept near the fruit bowl. He uncapped the pen with the focused deliberateness of someone who had already been thinking about the first sentence for a while. He wrote. Ethan watched him for a moment. The bent head, the careful handwriting, the hoodie-covered hands moving across the paper. And then he looked out the window at the Saturday afternoon, and he thought about systems and patterns, and the long, patient work of changing the rooms that needed changing, and about 12 kids in a gym in Mission Hills who arrived at 7:30 on Saturdays to a space that saw them clearly and said so, and about a 14-month-long silence that a girl named Priya had been keeping about being exceptional in a room that refused to notice, and about a boy named Tyler who was beginning to sleep through the night again, and about a man named Marcus who was writing a 12th draft. I thought about all of it. And then he stopped thinking about it and just let it be, because some things didn't need to be held tightly. Some things were already moving in the right direction under their own momentum. Noah wrote for 20 minutes without stopping. When he finished, he folded the letter once carefully and looked up. "How do I get it to him?" he asked. Ethan held out his hand. "Let me make a call." Noah handed him the letter. Ethan looked at it for a moment. The folded paper, the careful crease, the slightly ink-smudged edge where Noah's hoodie cuff had dragged across it. Then he picked up his phone and called Sandra Yates. Sandra Yates answered on the third ring. She sounded like someone who had been half expecting a call but hadn't known from which direction it would come. Her voice carried the particular quality of a person in cautious recovery, Not fragile but careful. The way someone sounds when they've been through something that taught them to hold their breath before committing to an exhale. "Mr. Walker," she said. "Ms. Yates, I hope this isn't a bad time." No, it's fine. I actually picked up the phone twice this week to call you and put it back down both times." "Why?" A pause. "Because I didn't want to put anything else on you. You'd already done the thing that needed doing. And calling to say thank you felt like it might also accidentally become calling to hand you more weight to carry, and that didn't seem fair." Ethan looked at the folded letter on the table in front of him. "I'm calling because my son wrote something. A letter. He'd like Tyler to have it if Tyler would want to read it." The line went quiet for a moment. "Your son wrote Tyler a letter," Sandra repeated. Her voice had changed. Not dramatically. Just in the way a voice changes when something unexpected arrives in the right place at the right time. He's 10. Yes. And he wrote Tyler a letter. He did. 20 minutes, no stops, his own words. I didn't help." Sandra was quiet for longer this. When she spoke again, her voice was careful in a different way. The careful of someone trying not to cry in front of a person they'd just met on the phone. "Can I ask what it says?" "I didn't read it." A small sound surprise. "You didn't read it?" "It was addressed to Tyler. I don't read other people's mail." He paused. "I can scan it and send it to you first if you want to decide whether Tyler sees it. That's your call to make, not mine." "No," Sandra said, quickly. Then more slowly, "No. I think if your son wrote it from himself to Tyler, then it should go from your son to Tyler exactly as it is, without me filtering it." A breath. "I think Tyler needs to experience someone his approximate age saying whatever Noah said without it being curated by an adult first." "Okay." Ethan paused. "How is he?" "He slept 6 hours 2 nights in a row this week. That's since February the best consecutive nights he's had." She paused. "He started eating lunch again on Thursday. His counselor says he's beginning to externalize it. He slept 6 hours 2 nights in a row this week. That's since February the best consecutive nights he's had." She paused. "He started eating lunch again on Thursday. His counselor says he's beginning to externalize it, starting to understand that what happened was done to him rather than revealed about him. That's the language she uses, revealed about him." A pause. He believed it for a while. That Marcus saw something true. That there was something genuinely wrong with Tyler underneath. And Marcus had just been the first person honest enough to say it. Ethan was quiet. "That's the part that kept me up at night," Sandra said. "Not the faking illness. Not even the not eating. The believing. Because you can address behavior. You can work with behavior. But when a 12-year-old starts to believe that the cruelest version of themselves that someone else constructed is the accurate version." She stopped, gathered herself. "That's harder." "Is he getting there?" Ethan asked. "Away from that." Slowly. "Yes." A pause. "The video helped. I know that sounds strange, but watching it, Tyler watched it 3 times, and I sat with him for the 3rd time. And afterward he said, he couldn't do that to a real person. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Marcus couldn't do that to a real person. To someone with actual training. He could only do it to us because we didn't know how to stop him." She paused. Something shifted in him after that. Like the power differential became visible to him in a way it hadn't been before. He stopped being ashamed of the fact that he hadn't known how to fight back. He started being angry at the fact that an adult with authority had used it incorrectly. "I wanted to know whether Tyler might want to come to a Saturday session, at a different gym, the one Noah started this morning." The line was quiet. "I know that might be too much," Ethan continued. "It might not be the right time. The counselor's input matters more than my son's instinct. But the offer is open, and there's no pressure, and—" "Let me ask him," Sandra said. "Of course. Mr. Walker," she paused. "I want to say something that I don't know how to say correctly, so I'm just going to say it plainly. Please, what you did that Tuesday night, I know the narrative around it became about the punch, about the sparring, about the dramatic version of it. But what I think about when I think about it, what I keep seeing in my mind, is you crouching down next to your son after the throw. The way you crouched all the way down. Not a quick bend. You went fully down to his level. Her voice was steady, but something in it was working. Tyler had people watch what was happening to him every Tuesday and Thursday for 8 months, and not one of them got off their chair. Not one. They just sat there and watched. A pause. You got off your chair. Ethan said nothing for a moment. I got off my chair because my son was on that mat, he said finally. I know, but you stayed in the room and got on the mat for the rest of them. She paused. I want Tyler to meet you. Not because you're some kind of hero. Because I want him to see that there are men who use their capability to protect rather than to perform. He hasn't seen enough of that. Ethan looked at the window. At the afternoon moving outside it. We'll make it work, he said. They exchanged information. He sent her Raymond's card details separately. They ended the call with the particular ease of people who had established trust in a short time, because the circumstances had stripped away everything that usually slowed that process down. He set his phone on the table. Noah looked at him. Well, she's going to ask Tyler about Saturday. Noah exhaled. Not dramatically, just a breath that was longer than the ones before it. Good. She's also going to send me the address for the letter. Noah nodded. He looked at the folded paper still on the table between them, and he reached out and straightened it slightly. Just one corner, the way you adjust something that matters. Do you think he'll read it? Noah asked. Yes. How do you know? Because his mother is someone who makes good decisions about what her son needs, Ethan said. And she already said yes. On Monday, Claire Ashford published a short follow-up piece. The licensing board had formally suspended Titan Combat Academy's youth program, pending the completion of their review. The suspension was not permanent. It was procedural a hold, while the 14 complaints were formally evaluated. But its immediate effect was that the doors of the gym were closed to the 32 children who had been enrolled in Marcus's various youth classes. On Monday evening, Ethan got a call from a woman named Patricia Hong, whose son had been in Marcus's advanced youth class for 2 years. She had found Ethan's number through Gerald, who had apparently become a central node in a network of parents that had been forming quietly all week. Patricia's son was 15, had a natural aptitude for the sport, and had spent 2 years being told by Marcus that potential without obedience was worthless. Obedience being defined, as it turned out, as unquestioning acceptance of Marcus's authority and an enthusiastic participation in the performance of his reputation on social media. He stopped posting for Marcus about 8 months ago, Patricia said. Marcus told him it was unprofessional. What he meant was, it was unhelpful. My son figured out the difference. He sounds perceptive, Ethan said. He's very perceptive. He's also furious, which is, I think it's the right response, but I don't know what to do with it. A pause. Someone mentioned Raymond Okafor's name to me in a parent group online. Is he the real thing? He's the real thing, Ethan said. My son is 15, advanced level. Will Raymond work with that? Call him, leave a short, honest message. He'll call back. Short and honest. Leave out everything except what you actually need him to know. A pause. My son is 15, technically advanced, 2 years of good training underneath bad guidance, angry, and trying to figure out what that anger is for. She said it slowly, workshopping it. Is that short and honest? That's perfect, Ethan said. Say exactly that. 9 calls, Raymond said. He was pouring coffee. He handed Ethan a mug without asking. 2 of them I already knew. Gerald's been busy. Gerald is efficient, Ethan said. He is. Raymond looked at Noah. How's the left side? Noah blinked. You noticed that from one session. I notice everything from the first session, Raymond said. That's what the first session is for. He handed Noah a glass of water without asking the same as last time. What did you work on at home? Left side combinations, slow repetition. Noah paused. I also watched some footage. Technical breakdowns. I wanted to understand the mechanics behind what you were teaching, not just the movements. Raymond looked at him. Why mechanics? Because if I only learn the movement without understanding why it works, I can only reproduce it under the conditions I learned it in. If I understand the mechanics, I can adapt. Raymond was quiet for a moment. He looked at Ethan briefly, the same brief, complete look as last Saturday. Then back at Noah. Who taught you to think that way? Noah glanced at his father. He did, but he would say he just asked questions and I figured it out. That's accurate, Ethan said. Raymond almost smiled. Drink your water. Session starts in 20 minutes. The Thursday session was harder than Saturday's. Raymond pushed differently, more expectation, more refinement, less margin for the tentative half attempt. He had clearly incorporated what he'd observed on Saturday and reset his calibration accordingly. For Noah, this meant the left side got worked until it was burning and then worked slightly past that point, because that was where adaptation happened, and Raymond knew exactly where that point was and how far past it was productive versus counterproductive. Halfway through the session, Raymond stopped the class. He called Noah to the center of the mat. Every head turned. The other students, the 6 from Saturday plus 2, new additions. Both of them clearly from the network of displaced Titan students, watched without any of the anxious, braced energy that had defined the watching at Titan Combat Academy. They watched the way people watch when they're curious, rather than afraid. Teach the entry to the outside redirect, Raymond said to Noah, the way I showed it Saturday. Noah looked at him. I've only done it twice. I know. Teach it anyway. A pause. Noah turned to face the group. He stood there for a moment, that inside-out steadying familiar now to anyone who'd watched him over the past month, and then he began. He got the entry right. He got the hand position right. He got the weight transfer almost right, and Raymond quietly said, shift your hip earlier, without emphasis. And Noah adjusted mid-explanation, and the adjustment was correct, and he kept going. When he finished, Raymond said, questions for Noah. The 15-year-old from Monday, Patricia Hong's son, whose name was Daniel, which Ethan noticed with a small private recognition, raised his hand. Why the outside rather than inside redirect in that position? Noah thought about it. Because the inside redirect requires you to move toward the attack, which means if your timing is off by even a small margin, you absorb impact. The outside redirect takes you off the angle completely. The timing window is wider. Daniel looked at Raymond. Raymond said nothing because nothing needed to be said. Daniel looked back at Noah. Nodded once, with the particular respect of an older student, acknowledging something accurate. After the session, Noah sat against the wall with his water bottle and his legs extended, and his chest rising and falling with the deep, even breath of someone who had worked correctly. Ethan sat beside him. They were both quiet for a minute. You taught it, Ethan said. Yeah. How did it feel? Noah considered. Terrifying for about 30 seconds. Then it was just information. I had the information and I was sharing it. A pause. It felt like the clearest I've ever understood the technique. Teaching it made me understand it differently. Raymond said that would happen. He was right. Noah drank from his water bottle. Daniel asked a good question. He did. He's going to be good here. Yes. Ethan agreed. Noah was quiet for another moment. Then, Sandra texted you. Ethan looked at his phone. He'd felt it buzz during the session and had not checked it. He opened it now. The text from Sandra read, Tyler read the letter 4 times. He wants to come Saturday. He asked me to ask you if Noah will be there. I said I assumed yes. He said okay then. Ethan read it twice. Then he held the phone out to Noah. Noah, read it. His face did something complicated and real. Not the practiced stillness, not the controlled processing. Something more immediate than that. Something that arrived before the processing could intercept it. He handed the phone back. 4 times, Noah said. 4 times. Noah looked at the ceiling for a moment. I didn't know what to write. I just wrote what was true. I wrote that someone tried to make me feel like I was a footnote in a room I had every right to be in. I wrote that I didn't fully believe it, but I could feel where it wanted to take me if I let it. And I wrote that there's a place that sees you the right way, and it changes what's possible. He paused. I don't know if that's what he needed. He read it 4 times, Ethan said. Noah was quiet. Yeah. That's your answer. Saturday arrived the way the best Saturdays do, without announcing itself, just there when you looked for it. Cool and clear and already in motion before you'd fully decided to meet it. They pulled into the parking lot of Mission Hills Community Gym at 6:53. There was already a second car there that hadn't been there the previous week, a blue sedan parked carefully, 2 figures visible inside it that hadn't gotten out yet. Noah looked at the sedan. Is that them? Probably. Should we go over? Let them come when they're ready, Ethan said. They got out of the truck. Raymond was in his usual spot near the entrance, coffee in hand, the specific stillness of a man who had decided how he was going to meet the morning and was simply implementing that decision. He looked at Ethan, looked at the blue sedan, said nothing. The car door opened at 7:02. Sandra Yates got out first. She was around 40, with the posture of someone who had been through a year that used to be described as hard before she'd had a few months of distance in which to understand that hard didn't fully cover it. She moved with the particular careful energy of a parent who was holding themselves steady, specifically so that someone else could lean on that steadiness if they needed to. The passenger door opened. Tyler Yates was 12 years old and smaller than Ethan had pictured. Not physically small, average height for his age, built like a kid who used to be athletic and had been slowly, carefully finding his way back to it. But there was a quality to how he occupied space that was smaller than his body. The way he positioned himself slightly behind his mother's shoulder. The way his eyes went to Raymond first, then Ethan, then Noah, then back to the ground, completing the circuit before committing to any of the people in it. Noah stepped forward. Not quickly. Not with the performed friendliness of someone trying to make another person comfortable. He walked the natural distance and stopped and said, "Tyler." Tyler looked up. His jaw was tighter than it should have been for a 12-year-old at a Saturday morning gym visit. "Yeah. I'm Noah." "I know." A pause. "I read your letter." "I know, 4 times." Something flickered across Tyler's face. Brief, real, slightly embarrassed. "My mom told you that." "She did." A pause. "It was a good letter. I wasn't sure what to put in it." "You put the right things." Tyler said it quickly, like something that had been building up pressure and came out faster than he planned. He looked away, then back. "The part about the footnote. I kept reading that part." Noah nodded. "I know that feeling." Does it go away?" They went inside together. Noah and Tyler, walking slightly ahead, the way kids do when they went inside together. Noah and Tyler walking slightly ahead, the way kids do when they're establishing something between themselves. The parents and Raymond a few steps behind in the unspoken agreement of adults who know when not to interrupt. Raymond walked beside Ethan for a moment. "Patricia Hong's son is coming at 7:30, Raymond said quietly. "I have 3 more new students starting today. 2 of them are from your gym." He said it without any weight, just information. "I'm going to need to expand the Saturday session." "Is that a problem?" "No." Raymond looked straight ahead. "It's what happens when a thing that needs to exist starts existing." He paused. "I've been running this program for 6 years. 43 students total. Counting today, I'm adding 7 in 1 week." He was quiet for a moment. "You know what that number means?" "It means 43 kids had this for 6 years, and the kids who needed it at Titan didn't," Ethan said. "It means a system that should have caught what Marcus was doing didn't. It means 14 complaints went nowhere for 3 years. It means Tyler Yates lost 8 months of sleeping through the night." Raymond's voice didn't change. It remained exactly level. "I'm not celebrating the expansion. I'm noting what it cost." Ethan said nothing, because nothing was the right response. Raymond stopped walking for a moment, looked at Ethan directly. "You knew when you got on that mat that there would be consequences. For the gym, for Marcus, for the community fallout." "Yes." "You thought through all of it." "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "Yes." Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then, Danny Reyes was like that. Ethan went very still. Gerald told me your background, Raymond said. He mentioned Danny. We overlapped briefly in 2009. Different units, same operating area for about 4 months. He looked at Ethan steadily. He talked about a young SEAL medic, didn't give names, but he described the quality the one you have. The ability to calculate and feel at the same time, which is rare. Most people who are good at calculation learn to suppress feeling. Most people who are good at feeling can't calculate clearly. Danny said this kid had both in the same moment without one canceling out the other. Ethan was silent. I thought about that description this morning when I watched you watching Noah teach the redirect, Raymond said. You were calculating, measuring his delivery, noting where the explanation was precise, tracking the group response. And you were feeling it. Not performing feeling, just having it, quietly. He paused. Danny would have been glad to know that kid grew up to be the man who got off his chair. The words landed in Ethan Walker's chest, in a place that had very little traffic. A place that was usually sealed, not out of damage, but out of appropriate conservation. The place where certain things lived that were too important to be touched casually. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "He used to tell me that the measure of what you've learned is what you pass forward." "Yeah," Raymond said. "That sounds like him." They went inside. The session that followed was the fullest Raymond had run. 12 students ranging from 8 to 15, the room more alive than it had been in 6 years of Saturday mornings. Raymond moved through it with the same unhurried precision. The session that followed was the fullest Raymond had run. 12 students ranging from 8 to 15, the room more alive than it had been in 6 years of Saturday mornings. Raymond moved through it with the same unhurried precision, the same private corrections and specific praise, the same structure that built rather than diminished. He gave Tyler a partner on the mat immediately. Not Noah, deliberately, not Noah, but Chloe, who was 8.5 and terrifyingly perceptive, and who spent the first 5 minutes of their drill time explaining the difference between yelling and a safety correction, with the same unnerving accuracy she'd deployed on Noah 2 weeks earlier. Tyler looked at Chloe and said, "How old are you?" 8.5, Chloe said. "You know a lot for 8.5. I listen, Chloe said with the simplicity of someone stating an obvious truth. You can learn almost anything if you actually listen instead of waiting for your turn to talk. Tyler stared at her. Then something happened in his face, something that cracked open slightly, something that had been held very tight for a very long time, and he made a sound that was half breath and half laugh and all surprise. The surprise of someone encountering an unexpected truth delivered without cruelty by an 8-year-old in a church gym on a Saturday morning. From the edge of the mat, Sandra Yates watched her son laugh. She had both hands pressed flat against her thighs, which was what her hands did when they were trying not to reach for her face, and her eyes were bright with something she was also trying not to reach for. She stood like that for a moment, just watching her son laugh. Then she sat down. At 10:15 after the session ended, and the students were cooling down, and the room had the good noise of people who had worked well together. Raymond called the group in. He sat on the mat. They sat around him in the loose circle that was the shape of every end-of-session debrief he ran, not formal, not hierarchical, just gathered. He looked around the circle. "Some of you are new today," he said. "Some of you have been here a while. I want to say something to all of you that I say to every group eventually. But I'm saying it now because today feels like the right day for it." He paused. "You will encounter people in your life who use their capability as a weapon, who use their position, their skill, their authority to make other people smaller. And the natural response to that, the human response, is to either try to become bigger than them or to believe the story they're telling about you." The room was quiet. "Neither of those is the answer," Raymond continued. "The answer is what you're all building here, which is the ability to stand in a room with that kind of energy and remain exactly who you are. Not unchanged growth changes you, and growth is the point. But yourself, your actual self, the one that exists independent of what that person needs you to be." He paused. "That is harder than any technique I will ever teach you. It is also more important. And it is possible. It is entirely possible. You are doing it right now in this room every time you correct a movement without shame, and every time you help someone else correct theirs. He looked at Tyler for a moment. Not singling him out, the look moved through the whole circle, but Tyler received it and held it and didn't look away. The world will try to tell you who you are before you've had a chance to find out for yourself, Raymond said. Your job is to keep finding out anyway. He stood. Thursday, he said, and that was all. The room began to dissolve into movement, into bags being picked up and shoes being retrieved, and the warm noise of people in the aftermath of shared effort. Sandra reached Tyler before he'd fully stood up, and he let her put her hand on his shoulder, which she took for the permission it was, and did not make more of than it needed to be. Noah found Ethan at the edge of the mat. He laughed, Noah said. I saw. Chloe made him laugh. Noah's expression was something between amazement and affection. She's 8.5. 8.5, Ethan confirmed. Noah looked around the room at Daniel Hong stretching with the focused economy of a serious athlete at Priya, who had arrived midway through the session after Diane had apparently gotten Raymond's number through Claire Ashford, within 48 hours of Ethan putting the idea in motion, and who had spent the last half of the session working combinations with Raymond, watching and acknowledging each one specifically, precisely correctly, in a way that had made the girl stand differently, with every acknowledgement, taller and clearer, and more solidly present in her own right to occupy space. At Chloe, who was now explaining something to Tyler with both hands, moving Tyler's face fully open in a way it hadn't been when he arrived. At Raymond speaking quietly to Sandra near the doorway, his posture calm and direct, no performance, just presence. Noah was quiet for a moment. But it's different now. For the ones in this room, yes. And the ones who come next. Noah paused. Because this is here now, and they'll come here instead of there. Ethan looked at his son steadily. Yes. Noah nodded. The nodding of someone integrating something large and real, and not entirely comfortable, but entirely necessary. Okay, he said. Okay. They drove home the long way because Noah asked for it, and Ethan had no reason to say no. The long way took them through Mission Hills proper, through the older neighborhoods, with the tall trees and the houses that had been there long enough to look like they meant it through the Saturday morning, that was now fully open and warm and specific, in the way that days are specific when they've contained something that matters. Noah was looking out the window. What are you thinking? Ethan asked. About what Raymond said, about remaining yourself. What about it? I was trying to remember about what Raymond said, about remaining yourself. What about it? I was trying to remember who I was before Titan, before Marcus, what I was like. He paused. And I couldn't clearly separate it, like I couldn't find the exact line between before and after. Ethan looked at the road. What does that tell you? I'm not sure. Maybe that it changed me more than I thought. He paused. Or maybe that the before and after aren't the right way to think about it. Maybe it's not before and after. Maybe it's more like added to. He worked on it. Like I'm not less than I was before Marcus, but I know something now that I didn't know before, about how it feels when someone tries to rewrite you. And knowing that even though how I learned it was bad, the knowing itself isn't bad. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, kept his hands steady on the wheel, kept his face doing what his face always did in moments like this. Quiet, present, completely there without requiring anything from the moment, except to let it be what it was. That, he said, is exactly right. Noah looked over at him. You think so? I don't say things I don't mean. I know. A pause. It's kind of annoying sometimes. I know. Noah almost smiled. But useful. Occasionally. They drove. The city moved around them. The morning was full of the ordinary world. Other cars, other families, other Saturdays happening in their own directions. And somewhere in that ordinary world, a 12-year-old named Tyler was going home, having laughed for the first time in months, and a girl named Priya was going home, having finally been seen clearly by someone whose opinion of her ability was accurate and worth receiving, and a man named Raymond was going to spend Monday morning figuring out how to expand a Saturday session that had outgrown its current configuration, and a man named Marcus was probably writing a 13th draft of something that the 12th had started to get right. And a 10-year-old boy named Noah Walker was going home from a Saturday morning with his father wearing his oversized hoodie, looking out the window at the city he'd grown up in, carrying something new in the architecture of who he was. Not the weight of what had been done to him, but the weight of what he now knew he was capable of. That was the difference. That was always the difference. Weight you carry because it was put on you, and weight you carry because you chose it, because it belongs to something true about yourself that you've decided to be responsible for. The first kind bends you. The second kind is what you stand on. Ethan had spent 20 years learning that distinction in contexts that had no pleasant framing. He had brought his son to a martial arts gym to learn courage, and what they had both found in the wreckage of a broken thing and the careful construction of a better one was something that went past courage, past technique, past the particular vocabulary of combat and discipline, and the physical grammar of a trained body. They had found the thing underneath all of it, the ground you build on, the part that stays yours when everything else is taken apart and examined and challenged and attempted to be rewritten by someone who needs you to be less than you are. The part that when you find it, when you really find it, not as a concept, but as a lived and practiced and defended truth, nobody can reach. That evening, Ethan sat in the garage with the half-assembled bicycle and a cup of coffee that had gone cold while he was thinking. And he thought about Daniel Reyes, who was 42 years old in 2011, and is therefore not older now, and he said something quiet in the direction of that absence that wasn't a prayer exactly, but was the thing you say to people who changed you when saying it to them directly is no longer possible. He said, "I'm passing it forward." Then he picked up his wrench and finished the bicycle. Inside the house, Noah was at the kitchen table in his big hoodie, working on homework with the focused, unhurried attention of a person who had learned something essential about the relationship between effort and outcome, between showing up and getting better, between the story someone else tries to write about you and the one you decide to live instead. The kitchen light was on. The homework was getting done. The spaghetti was already planned for dinner. Everything that needed to be built was being built one Saturday morning at a time in a plain gym in Mission Hills, where the walls said nothing except two true things, and where 12 kids and one 8.5-year-old and a boy who had stopped eating lunch and a girl whose combinations deserved to be seen were building the ground they were going to stand on for the rest of their lives. That was the story. Not one punch. Not the sparring match. Not the video. Not the 14 complaints, or the licensing review, or the social media numbers climbing toward 1 million in a week. The story was a father who got off his chair, a son who wrote a letter, a man in a parking lot who said, "Come early," a 12-year-old who laughed. The story was what got built in the aftermath. The story was always what got built in